Please welcome my guest for this evening, Royzoga.
Hello.
OBS, why are you struggling?
Oh no,
Darn
it's OBS struggling.
It was struggling, but we're good. We're good. Hello, welcome on in, Roy. How are you doing this fine evening?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh no, the pleasure is all mine. I'm sure that most folks who are tuning in and watching on YouTube afterward, hi YouTube, they're probably already familiar with you, but for anyone who might not be, if you could introduce yourself.
Do you want the full spiel?
Yeah, why not?
What is going on, everybody? My name is Royzoga. Roll that R as always. I'm a buddy barista VTuber specialized in voice acting and housing a cafe called the Compilation, that's where I bring in various VTubers from the neighborhood to the improv sketch comedy, but more importantly tonight I'm here with Vtuber Talk.
I did remember to roll that R though.
There you go. There you go. That's half the battle.
Yes, indeed. How many times have you... I'm not even going to bother asking how many times you've said that. How long did it take you to rehearse that before you had it down to the point where you were ready to do it on the air?
Never. I just did it live. I made it up on the spot.
Well, there you go. Sometimes it's just that simple.
It really is. I mean, like, that's the glory of improv. Sometimes you just make stuff up and you hope that the spaghetti you threw at a wall sticks.
Yeah, and for folks who might have missed the just utter barrage of words that were in there, as you mentioned, you host you run the Cup of Dusk, a cafe where you host, for lack of a better term, a talk show of your own, where you have folks in for live improv comedy, effectively, and that there's a lot that goes into that. Because running a show at all, running a stream at all, already takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of coordination. Putting on a deliberate level of improv comedy, because let's face it, anything that is just chatting, anything that's live is going to have a level of improv. When you're going into it with the mindset of, all right, we're actually going to try and put on really an improv show with that mindset, that takes it to a whole new level. Is that something that you knew from the outset you were going to be interested in doing, or is it something you maybe just fell into and like, I just realized I did an improv comedy show. Let's run with that.
So, it's funny because I've had a couple people ask that, like why did I fall into improv, or like why did I fall into like the way that the cafe is instead of just being an interview show, because that's kind of what I initially had set out to do. But no, it kind of just happened. Like even from my first episode with Maneki K, which is lost to the ages and you cannot find anymore. You go and watch that, or the second episode, the one that I had with Prism. You very much see that there's a moment specifically in the Prism episode where like you can see that I'm nervous, and then maybe like 20 or 30 minutes in, it's just like there's like a switch that gets flipped, and we just dive in, and it's pure and utter chaos, and it was like something came alive. So like from that moment that I had with Kay and then Prism, and then the first couple of episodes, I kind of like realized, I was like, oh wow, like this is not at all like I planned, but this is better than what I had expected. So let's go with this.
Yeah, and sometimes that's just how it goes. And whether it be improv comedy style, I think that's something that is relatively, if not common, that it is something that is very prone to happen in live productions. It's just that you make your plans and you try to stick to your plans as best you can. And inevitably, somewhere along the line, something is going to go awry. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But in those cases, when you see something go better than planned, and you sort of have that cognizant moment of, oh, wait a minute, I didn't plan this, but this was really good.
Yeah.
Let's do that again. It's a very special moment, because it is just sort of that, stumbling upon just a found gem or an idea, and to be able to then run with it and grow it is just something that's really, really fun and exciting.
Yeah, and it's always funny how it kind of works out like that, because generally most of the time that I go into the cafe sessions, even now, most of it's improv. Very rarely do we schedule things out, except for maybe like intro bits, or maybe like one or two like specific bits or jokes that we really want to tell.
Yeah.
But other than that, like we kind of just dive in and we have fun with it,
And that's the whole point of improv, that, you might set up, like you said, an intro bit, just have your cold open set, something good to set the mood, something, just a nice opening stinger. But from there, obviously, the point of improv is to not have much of a plan, and it is something that you're clearly adept at. It's something that your guests are very adept at, and it's very fun to see that. I was fortunate enough to have Prism on the show, actually, just a couple weeks ago, actually. and she was just absolute delight. And it's an absolute delight to have you on now as also. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, because you stream a fair bit, my man. And you also work a fair bit. Plus you're tweeting, plus you're making multiple YouTube shorts and YouTube videos. You're very busy.
I try to. I've actually been trying to take more time off recently. Most Fridays for the past couple of weeks I've been trying to have as my like, I'm not doing anything content related aside from like auto scheduled like shorts or TikToks or things like that. And then like obviously like, you know, the occasional dumb posting on Twitter or I actually forgot to ask, is it okay to curse?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That
So
the rating of VTuber Talk slides entirely based on the guest, and I can guarantee you I
Perfect.
have had folks on this show that are more profane than you.
Okay, good. So the occasional shit posting on Twitter, and things of that nature. But I try to give myself at least one day where I'm not doing anything. Unfortunately, for like the next week or two, I'm kind of breaking that rule,
Oops.
unintentionally, just because there's a lot of things that I want to get out, and my schedule just kind of like, it was like, hey, this is not going to be a forever thing. It's going to be like 1 or 2 weeks, and then we can get back into like the, hey, we're getting back to normalcy kind of thing.
Yeah, sometimes that just happens, whether it be IRL work or just, life plans. Life happens, and sometimes you see a lot of really cool opportunities, or you're talking with folks and their schedules all line up. So it's like, hey, we can all make things work in the schedule. But it also means that you're going to have something every single day for a little bit, and you just work through it. Because
Yeah.
if it's 1 or 2 weeks, that's fine. But I am glad that under normal circumstances that you do make that mental effort to say, hey, all right, I'm gonna make sure that Friday is that day where I just get to relax.
Yep. Yeah. More recently, I've been trying to do that because I did go through a little bit of a bout of burnout back in like August, just because I was definitely working myself too hard. Just to kind of bring it back into that. I know my biggest thing is I thrive in fire. So like when I'm busy or at my busiest is generally when I feel like I do my best. But even then, there's still such a thing as being too busy.
Yeah, I think that's something that content creators in general usually end up having, of just usually folks who get into content creation are ones that like that type of simulation, like to be busy, like to have things happening fast and live. And that if it's something you enjoy, you usually do a little bit more, and you're having fun. And then at some point, somewhere, you end up crossing that threshold of sanity. That's how burnout happens. Burnout is something that happens whether it be, content creation, career, anything in life. Too much of a good thing can end up being a bad thing. And it's just being able to bounce back from that burnout, being able to recognize, hey, I'm burning out. I should stop, or I should throttle back a bit.
Yeah, it can be hard sometimes to recognize it a little bit, but like once I did like recognize it specifically in the sense of like, hey, like I'm burning out. It took me a while to recover from it. So even then, like even when you recognize that you're in burnout, it's really important to be able to give yourself the downtime. So like my scheduling changed a lot from like when I realized I was in burnout. God, I think only like maybe like within the past 3 weeks or so have things started to get better again. But like there was like a solid good chunk of August and almost all of September was just bad. Like mental wise, physical wise, stress wise. Even though like I was trying to actively take better care of my health and my mental health and things like that, I was still actively in burnout and painfully aware that I was in it for a solid month and a half.
Yeah, even if you discover burnout, even if you recognize it, getting out of that is certainly not an overnight type of thing. It's not just I'm burning out. Now I'm not. You do need to work for it. And I'm very glad that you were able to, one, recognize, but then be able to take those steps. And even if it took a little bit of time to get there, that you have been able to bounce back.
Yeah, I mean, even now I'm still actively trying to set up safety nets for myself so I don't just immediately fall back into it. Because like I mentioned, things are starting to get better again, which is great, and I'm really happy about that. But I really don't want it to be the same issue or the same mistakes that I made before.
Yeah, and especially if you notice, I have 2 very busy weeks on the horizon.
Well, luckily, like this week specifically, I was literally just like, I want to finish Resident Evil 4. So it's literally why
Yeah.
I scheduled an extra day. So like, it wasn't even like, oh my god, there's this oh my amazing ultra collab that I'm doing at the cafe, or like this like crazy busy event. It was just like, hey, like I'm spending time with you. I'm doing cafe, and I'm like, okay, well, let's throw in Resident Evil 4, and I can make sure I have some stream time for myself.
Yeah, you were actually just playing that last night. Obviously, the classic, what are you buying? What are you
Yeah.
selling?
What are you buying? What are you selling?
And you are very good at that. This is not a first playthrough of Resident Evil 4. That you were doing, it was hardest difficulty.
Yep.
Were there any other stipulations on it? I forget.
Just new game hardest difficulty. Because like there's achievements that I'm missing on the Steam version, so I was like, oh, I'll just play through the Steam version on professional, and we'll have some fun, I guess.
Yeah, but as someone who is very not good at first-person shooters, when I was watching you play, it was just very painfully obvious of, oh, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, that this isn't necessarily a crazy challenge run where he's going to be dying a bunch. And obviously, you die a couple times. That happens in any given game, that you're not going for a deathless run or anything, but it just... I could see you anticipating where enemies are, and anytime that you see somebody doing that in the game, it's like, oh, well, they've done this game a couple times.
Just a few.
Is there anything about Resident Evil 4 that really sticks out for you in the franchise? That I know you enjoy horror games at large, and Resident Evil is naturally one of the most renowned horror franchises in gaming, but is there something about 4 that really sticks out for you, or was it just a matter of, oh, this is one I don't happen to have all the achievements in?
So that's definitely part of it, but also that Resident Evil 4 remake is coming out in March. So I was like, oh, I haven't played Resident Evil 4 on stream because I played it forever ago before I started streaming, because the game is 17 or 18 years old now.
Yep, it was on the GameCube.
Yep. So I was like, I might as well just play it on stream once and give people my impressions of it, talk about the game while it's happening, and give them like my opinions and my struggles, and show them some fun. So I love Resident Evil though. It's one of my favorite video game franchises. I would say it's probably my favorite horror franchise. I've been playing it for God knows how long. Speed ran a bunch of them. So
yeah, that so I personally have never really been one for horror, whether it be horror games, horror movies. I very much enjoy watching horror game streams. I'm not going to play horror games on my own, but there's something, it's very different for me of watching somebody play a horror game is sort of like watching the horror movie with the lights on,
I got you.
And just, hearing the commentary and seeing the stuff. And also just one thing that I love good stories and I love mysteries. And mysteries usually come attached to horror in some way, shape, or form of, what is the monster? Why is the monster? And so, like, I said I don't watch horror movies, but something I'll do on the regular is I'm going to go to Wikipedia and look up this new horror movie that I've seen a trailer for. I know I have no interest in seeing the film, but I want to know what happens. And I'll do that. And it's very much similar for me when it comes to horror games. I like watching those streams. I like seeing people go through them. And obviously, just they're still very well-made games. The art direction in them is fantastic. Just when you get a good horror game where it's either just the scenery or the monsters, that there's so much cool stuff there. And while I don't enjoy feeling the emotion of horror, I still have a very deep appreciation for everything that comes attached to it.
Horror is this weird thing. I guess I've been into like horror for like a long time, so it's like it's hard for me to look at it as to like other people's perspectives sometimes of like, oh man, I hate horror, and I'm like because like I've just been playing horror games for so long. Like I remember, like we talked about Resident Evil 4 coming out of the GameCube, and I remember when that happened. I remember when they ported Resident Evil 2 and 3 to the GameCube. I remember when 1 remake and 0 came into the GameCube, and all these other great games. And I may not have been allowed to play them at the time due to, parental restrictions and things of that nature.
Yeah, I get
but I always had a fascination with them.
Yeah, and I get the feeling that you and I are approximately the same age, just, based on our gaming history and certain memories that we've had and certain things that just... I've been pretty open. I turned 30 this year. So I'm slightly on the boomer side. of this community, which is weird as hell to say.
It is weird, right?
Yeah, but whatever. It means that a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more. Yeah, we've been around the block.
We've seen some shit, you know?
Yes, we have. Apart from 4, are there any others in Resident Evil that really stand out for you?
2.
That was a fast answer. What about 2?
Resident Evil 2 Classic is one of my favorite horror games of all time. It's definitely my favorite Resident Evil. I think it is like one of the epitomes and high points of the Resident Evil franchise. Obviously 4 is great as well, because it transitioned the franchise into, instead of this, fixed camera angles and like slow settings, it started trickling more into action, and a little bit of campiness. They kept some of the campiness with 4, which I think a lot of people appreciate. But then like we got 2 Remake, and they knocked it out of the park with 2 Remake. And I think 2 Remake, while I do like the original better, 2 Remake is just as good. Some areas it's better, some areas it's worse. And it's just, it was nice to see a bunch of love and care go into it. And since we have both of them, and they're 2 very different things, but still both very good, I just think it elevates both of them into their own thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that in this day and age where we're getting remakes of games where it's not just a port with a graphical upgrade, but it's a proper remake, and that there's going to be things different, whether it be just the inherent, the camera system, or things have been rebalanced, that you end up, like you said, having what ends up being essentially 2 different games, even if you can see the original in the remake. And along those lines, I know one game that you've played a lot of, both the original and the remake, is Final Fantasy VII.
So, funny thing.
So it's the original. Spoiler. I'm looking at your speedrun
Speedrun.com
thing, and I just realized, oh, wait a minute, it's not Final Fantasy VII. It is the original Final Fantasy, and then it's Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I might have actually stumbled and been wrong there. You might not have actually played Final Fantasy VII Original as much.
So I've definitely played Final Fantasy VII Original, but I think once. Like, that's it. Like, I played it once on stream, maybe like 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point.
Gotcha.
And I enjoyed it, but the remake was, I think, a lot better.
Yeah, very obviously that there was something for it that clicked for you. Was it just that you enjoyed the real time and the 3D of it all? Is it something that combat?
Yeah, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake, specifically what drew me to it the most was how fun the game is. For as much as I'll complain about like random stuff, and I have a lot to complain about for Final Fantasy VII Remake because I've played it so much. I've probably sunk a couple thousand hours into that game.
I can believe that, because looking at your speedrun.com, you hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate. They aren't first place records, but there's a second, a third, a fifth, a third, and a 10th on any percent easy, NMG easy, any percent normal, platinum percent, NG and NMG original, and NMG normal. I know a fair bit about speedrunning. Please remind me what NMG is.
No major glitches.
Okay, because I know glitchless. I guess, does NMG mean that there are certain minor glitches then that are allowed?
Yeah, there's like small things in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm trying to think of anything specific. I know in the first chapter, there's like one small glitch that we do where it's like you start running down a hallway, and then as soon as you hit like a certain like visual trigger, you turn around and it makes an elevator spawn fast. It's like, it saves you 2 seconds. It's not very difficult to do. It's literally just movement based. So we're like, we're gonna allow this because there's not really a reason not to. It just makes the game 2 seconds faster.
Gotcha.
So like that's an example of like a quote unquote glitch, but it's not a major glitch. God, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like glitch wise that's major, or at least quote unquote not major, that we would have allowed. But it's been so long since I've run FF7 Remake that I honestly can't remember. But yeah, FF7 Remake was my life for a while, for like a solid 6 months, 8 months.
I could believe that with this many different records, that's a lot to go into one game. And to be fair, it is a very good game. It's a very deep game, but at the same time, talking about things of burnout, that I know that at one point you did end up burning out of speedrunning as a whole. Still, that didn't happen before you racked up a good number of records. That most notably, you hold 3 world records, all in the .hack franchise.
Well, first I want to talk about the FF7 remake.
By all means.
You did mention like my current standings, and part of the burnout that happened from FF7 remake was I was actually world record holder in a bunch of those categories that I have times in, specifically the 4 main ones, which were any percent easy, any percent normal, NMG easy, and NMG normal.
Yeah, because those are the ones that you still hold second, third, and third in. And sorry,
Yep.
second, third, third, third.
Yeah. So it's grinding those was rough. But because FF7 Remake is a very different game from the .hack franchise, it also has a very different community because it's a very different franchise. You know, .hack versus Final Fantasy. Obviously, Final Fantasy is significantly larger, FF7 being the most recognizable Final Fantasy of all time. There's no question about it. So when you compare a speedrunning community for a big RPG like FF7 Remake, and then you compare it to a niche JRPG that never escaped the PS2, well, it's kind of obvious which is going to have more competition and more people in it. And that's not to say that .hack doesn't have competition, because I will tell you the other 2 record, or not record holders, but like second place and third place for Infection especially, we all pushed that time down. The amount of blood, sweat, and tears that went into routing and perfecting gameplay and looking for areas and just learning about what the system can do in .hack was immense. And even though it wasn't the size of FF7 Remake, the sense of community was still there. Because there would be times where like we would hit records, or we would find something new and then experiment and then find that it wasn't good, then find something new again and then find that it was good. And we would find these small optimizations over time. And it really felt like we had something special, even though the size wasn't there.
Yeah. That I have a couple of friends who are in the speedrun community. It's never something that I myself have tried my hand at, but it's something I have a general awareness of, a general understanding of, and it's something that I find utterly fascinating. Just like you said, the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this stuff is significant. That the amount of hours obviously is going to be so much more than what the actual record is, because it's how many repetitions you have to do to get to those records. And it can be painful because, all right, Final Fantasy VII, that the any percent easy record that you have at second place is 4 hours, 57 minutes, and 6 seconds, which for a game of Final Fantasy VII size, you look at that and say, holy cow, that's really fast. But at the same time, if you're 3.5 hours in and you make a mistake, that's 3.5 hours burnt, and that's not going to feel good.
Yeah, that was a big negative for Final Fantasy VII Remake, because the run is so long, and when you get to a level like that I was at, where you are competing for a world record and you're competing against these other really profound speedrunners and these really skilled people and players, literally every mistake that you make is like, should I reset? And you have to ask yourself that. And obviously in the beginning, it's easier to like say, hey, like, yeah, it's just, I'm only like 10 minutes in, I'll just reset now.
Some cost fallacy is very real in speedrunning.
Yes, very much so. But at the same time, there are times where even though you make a ridiculous number of mistakes, you never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to do. You never know what you're going to accomplish. You could end up recording. You could end up PBing. I think a lot of my records, if not all of them, have like really dumb, like obvious mistakes.
But it's still fewer mistakes than anybody else.
Exactly. So that's the big thing. One of my favorite memories of that specifically is I was doing a speedrun of any percent normal, and I was experimenting with something like a skip that we had just found, and I wasn't that great at it. And I went to do it, and I messed it up. But because of the way that I messed it up,
did you find something better? We
found something better that then made 4 other glitches possible, and it cut the run by like an hour.
Oh my gosh!
It is still like one of my like crowning achievements of like finding this glitch by accident.
Like in the community, if you find a glitch that cuts a minute, that's a success. That's huge. Cutting an hour.
It was insane.
That's monumental.
Like, the thing was, and I know this is gonna be weird to explain. I'll try and keep it like simple. So when you get out of bounds of Final Fantasy VII specifically, or remake, the game wants to try and put you back in bounds.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're out of bounds, there are these invisible walls that we call null space, meaning you can't get into that space. Null, meaning NULL.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would touch these null spaces, it would teleport you backwards and then try and put you back in bounds, because it's like, hey, you shouldn't be here. Get back in bounds.
Mm-hmm.
What I had found by accident was that if you get somebody to, when you trigger this out of bounds thing, if you entered combat beforehand and that person had to get teleported into combat, say they were climbing a ladder or jumping over something or something like that, then for some reason that specific character does not have that null space restriction. So I accidentally found that we could disable null space. So we called it null space disable.
Mm-hmm.
And it made like 4 other chapter skips possible because of it.
Oh my gosh.
Because we were literally like, we can't get out of, like, we can get out of bounds, but we keep getting teleported back and there's no like safe route to go. But as soon as we found null space disable, we were like, all right, cool, that's chapter 6 skip, that's chapter 8 skip, that's chapter 9 skip, that's chapter 10 skip. Like, we were finding
this is now sort of you found a glitch template.
Yes.
That once you found the cause, so this is actually even more fascinating for me because I work in game QA. So this is the type of thing that usually the type of stuff that I get assigned to do is not to this level of granularity, but when I get assigned a problem and I need to figure things out, that I do it's sometimes a process of elimination, reverse engineering, and you need to sometimes find these really quirky causes. The industry term for it is a repro. How do you reproduce this bug? How do you make it happen again? Because even if you're testing something and you find, all right, this has gone wrong, even if you know this went wrong, you might not know enough for the developers to be able to fix the thing. And usually if you can find what causes it, that gives the developer what they need to reverse engineer and go in the code and figure out, oh, okay, if it went wrong at this time in this specific instance, then it's much more likely to be because of this line here. So you effectively did a QA pass there, and that was it immediately on that first go that you realized why, or did you have to do that bug another couple times before you realized what the repro was?
So luckily we had it clipped because I was streaming it when it happened. And so like I had a couple other community members that were like, wait, what just happened? Like, where's null space? Like, why isn't it teleporting you? And I was like, I don't know, it's just gone. And so we were all kind of like, we were effectively pogging. Like we were literally doing the expression like, whoa. And because it was so exciting, because like we immediately were like, wait, if we can reproduce this, we all knew what it meant immediately. How many other skips would be viable. And very luckily, I had like 4 or 5 other people that immediately got to test it. And we were able to reproduce it, and we found what it was, and we went from there,
It just, one of the funny things that I realized over time is the speedrunning community is actually one of the greatest game QA communities in the world, because that I honestly feel that if game QA were to be something that any given speedrunner had interest in, that it would be something worth putting on their resume because of the skill set and the methodology and the mindset that you have to have as a speedrunner. It's going to be inherently an overlap with QA. Not to mention, in QA, sometimes things you need to do involve run-throughs and full run-throughs. And if you're a speedrunner, someone who knows how to do something fast, that just means that you're able to work that much more efficiently anyways. That there's a incredible amount of overlap in that skill set, and it's, like I said, just something that I find super fascinating and funny. Also, Team Zora, thank you for the follow. I missed that a couple minutes ago.
So the funny thing about it, and you may have heard it in my voice a little bit where I was sighing when you were talking about like it being QA and testing. We unfortunately firmly believe it's why when the upgraded version of FF7 Remake came out,
they patch it.
They patched a lot of stuff. And we as a community collectively sighed, because we got really excited because the big thing for Integrate, which is the upgraded version for FF7 Remake, we got excited because the big thing was like faster loads. We're not kidding when we say like a solid like 45 minutes to an hour was spent on load times in
Holy
FF7
cow.
Remake. It was a lot, especially depending on your system.
Yeah, so so your speed runs does not pause load times, because if memory serves, there are some speedrunners or speedrun games that they say the timer pauses during loads.
So we couldn't do that because it was a PS4 exclusive. So we were all running it on PS4, but we couldn't implement something that was like, oh, hey, you're in a cutscene or you're not in control of your character, pause the timer.
Gotcha.
Now that the game is on Steam, I'm sure it exists, but I haven't revisited the game, since I quit all those, that year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But the thing is like that initial big glitch, not null space disable, but the glitch that got us to be able to go out of bounds in the first place, they patched that out.
Yeah, well, because that's the other thing of QA, of if you have 2 bugs, but one bug fix will patch and make it so other repros aren't viable. That's smart programming on the developer side, and that sometimes in QA you'll say, hey, if you fix this one thing, you'll also actually domino effect these others, and that sometimes gets things bumped up in priority, because then they can say, oh, I fixed 3 bugs actually and not just 1. But at the same time, I can very much sympathize how that would be frustrating to the game running community.
Yeah, because like the big thing is the glitch that we did, we called it Infinite Flee. And it would exactly like it sounds. When you're in combat, you would initiate fleeing combat infinitely, and your battle speed is significantly faster than out of combat, especially if you have somebody like Tifa, who can slide along the ground and then cancel the slide into a punch and then cancel that into a slide and then cancel that into a punch, and over. She's super fast and busted. But the thing is in order to trigger Infinite Flee, the last person in your party that was alive had to die with revival earrings, which would automatically bring you back up. We found that the game's coding didn't recognize this properly, because it's like, oh, your party's dead, let's trigger game over. But it didn't recognize that someone was still alive, so it freaked the system out and it caused combat to never end. And by fixing that, by making Infinite Flee not a thing anymore, it patched like 8 of our 9 skips.
Oof.
So where we were all excited because of like cutscene reduction and things like that, saving us like 45 to an hour, the speed run went from like just under 5 hours to like over 5 hours again, because we couldn't do these skips anymore.
That is one of the fascinating things about the era of games that we live in now, where you have updates and patches. And to be fair, usually patches are going to be a good thing. That this is going to prevent the layman from actually getting into a bad state and something quirky from happening. That they're obviously not doing this to spite the speedrunning community or anything. No. But it is an unfortunate collateral damage that the developer sort of has to shrug and say sorry.
Yeah.
But at the same time, doesn't that mean that your records are relatively preserved?
So we had to make it separate categories, because Integrate ended up being this huge overhaul, and that's not the only thing they changed. There were gameplay balance changes, there were character balance changes, there were like it was a big overhaul.
Okay.
But we collectively were like, we understand why they did it collectively as a community, because it was not very hard to do, and we're 100% certain that casual players accidentally did it. Because it's literally just your last party member alive has to die.
Revive earrings.
Revive earrings, with revive earrings on.
That's a very common thing.
Yeah. So we're like, we understand why they did it.
Doesn't make it less painful.
Yeah, it hurt our soul. So like it almost killed the game, because we were grinding the game into the ground. Like we were squeezing blood from a stone, leading up into when Intergrade released. And the unfortunate part of it was, as soon as we found out that these skips didn't work, the community collectively like fell out.
Yeah. That's just, it's going to be so demoralizing, just really disheartening, that I can absolutely understand that.
Yeah. So that was the big thing. But that was my soiree into speedrunning, and probably the most success, or quote unquote, and I'm using very big air quotes, fame that I ever had with speedrunning.
But so then .hack that so, and I guess I should preface this for the games that you speedrun in general,
sure,
or that you speedran in general. Sure. you enjoy JRPGs, and I'm guessing that the way you sort of fell into this was just that you really enjoyed these JRPGs and were replaying them and found out that you were getting pretty good at it. Or were there any that you specifically sought out and began with the intent of speedrunning?
Ooh. So it's kind of funny because like if we're just talking JRPGs, no. The thing with it, with dot hack specifically, I actually started with the GU games because there was an HD collection for them, and I was already in speedrunning at that point. I was running I think RE2 Classic and Final Fantasy 1. I was trying to do Paper Mario. There were like a couple of like small games that I was running. I say small because I didn't put a lot of time or effort into them. But speedrunners that I was watching at the time, specifically Maxilobes, I saw him speedrunning the dot hack GU HD collection, and I was like, oh, I remember this series. I loved this series when I was younger. I didn't realize people speedran JRPGs. So my mindset went, oh, I thought people were only like speedrunning like horror games or like really like popular things. And I saw him doing it, and he was, you know, to me, was a significantly larger streamer, a larger content creator. And I went, okay, I want to do that. So I fell into dot hack, and then I went to the original dot hacks, and just kind of kept bouncing all over the place. But games I specifically, like, casually played specifically so I could speedrun it.
Well, I guess that were there any that you looked at perhaps and saw, oh, there's this record that hasn't been done in a while, and I don't know if many people have done it, or the other way around as well, that, you know, any of those different angles.
I mean, there were like RPGs that I started to learn that I like remembered really enjoying. Star Ocean was a big one, but I saw like how random that game can get and how optimized it had been with only like 3 people running it. And I'm like, there's no way I'm getting anywhere close to this record without putting like thousands of hours in. But I think dot hack was like the only one I especially was like, here I go, you know. I mean, like Resident Evil's like, because like I was speedrunning before Resident Evil 2 remake or 3 remake came out, so like I sought those out with the intention of speedrunning them, but like I was gonna play them anyway. FF7 remake, I don't remember why I started speedrunning it. I think I just saw a couple friends mention it, like from the speedrunning community, and I was like, oh, I really liked the combat system. I wonder what the speedrun's like, type thing, you know.
Yeah. And I look at this and I see, you know, Pokemon Yellow, you are 112th at 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 28 seconds. And just, you know, as someone who grew up with Pokemon and has played every generation, looking forward to Scarlet Violet, I look at 2 hours and 9 minutes and I just say, so, and that's glitchless. That is 80% glitchless. And the fact that it is that far down, and that's still at 112th. I'm just sort of mentally going through and like, how does one do that? That just, I guess it's at the point where you know exactly like tile for tile which path you need to walk, and that you need to hope to not hit many random encounters. I guess at some point you have to buy a bunch of repels or something. Like, just, that's still so fast.
So the early game is the most important thing with Pokemon, at least from what I remember, because we do a couple manipulations in the game, and it's called glitchless because they're not glitches. It's literally we manipulate the code that's happening and running in the background. Like the RNG, like the random number generator that's running in the background, people learn how to manipulate. So we learned how to do that specifically for 3 big things. This may have changed because it's been a long time since I've speedrun Pokemon Yellow, but the 3 big things at the time when I was doing it was we want to get a perfect EV'd Nidoran male. That way we could make Nidoking and have it be hyper busted for late game. We wanted to find a Pidgey in the Viridian Forest that was like, for some reason, the perfect catchability that we could just throw a Pokeball at it and it would catch immediately. And then the last one was in Mount Moon, where you're supposed to use Flash. Or I'm sorry, not supposed to use Flash. In Mount Moon, you're supposed to do it. It is a constant manipulation. Like, you walk the entirety of Mount Moon, doing manipulations so you don't get any encounters. And it was something that I just never learned how to do because it's like a solid like 5 to 7 minutes of pressing buttons at very specific times with not very large windows. And I was like, nah, man, this ain't it, Chief.
That's just wild to me.
It was insane. It was absolutely insane.
So I know that, like we mentioned, that's something that you did unfortunately burn out on, that you've moved past.
Yeah.
But it does sound like you still have many positive memories attached to it, and that it's a cool chapter, and it's something that I certainly don't get to talk with a lot of my guests about. So I do appreciate you allowing me to sort of go into those memories, even though I know that sadly the ending of that chapter perhaps was not so stellar. I still think it's really cool, and I am glad that you're at least able to revisit it and have a smile on your face for that.
I appreciate the trip down memory lane. I can say that I would go back to speedrunning in some capacities. Like when FF7 Remake Part 2 comes out, I'll probably like mess around with it and just see what the game feels like, and if I end up liking it or not.
And,
Resident Evils.
Hopefully with the burnout strategies that you've been developing now, in parallel, that hopefully that would be able to come into play and keep things in a healthy level for you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to play it safe,
Yeah.
because I can't let myself fall into that grind for world records all over again.
So I think that could be, something that you do, I don't know, maybe a couple streams where I think people would find it enjoyable, because there aren't actually that many VTubers that I've seen, at least, that do speedruns. That there's certainly a handful that they're around, but you have to look for them.
Yeah, I only know like 2, I think. So one of them is my friend that got me into VTubing, or one of the people that got me into VTubing. And I cannot remember the name of the other one, but I know it's friends with that same friend. So
the speedrun community does seem very tight knit.
Oh, it is complicated to describe, because there's, I don't know another way of saying this besides the way I'm going to say it, so I apologize, and I don't mean to open up a can of worms. It is very click heavy. The speedrunning community feels very much like their friends kind of stick with each other, and it's not always a bad thing, but making friends of the speedrunning community felt hard, especially if you were someone new. Like getting an FF7 remake, I had so many targets on my back, because I was quote unquote new blood, even though I had like pedigree in running RE2 and .hack and .hack GU and Kingdom Hearts. Like I had run a ton of games. I wasn't just out of nowhere. But the fact that I was putting up these big numbers and like world records and things like that, and competing with people that were considered like the old guard, people were like, ew, like who's this guy? Like where did he come
suppose
from?
I can understand how that community in particular would be prone to that, because obviously, like you said, clickiness is a bit of a topical thing, and we're not going to dive into all that, but it's the type of thing that in VTubing and in content creation at large, yes, clicks happen, but in content creation in general, in VTubing, it's not a zero-sum game. That somebody doing well does not bring somebody else down in content creation at large.
Yeah.
But in speedrunning, when it is an active competition and that there is a first, second, and third place, I'm not going to say it's good, but I will say at the very least that it is logical of how it can end up in that way. That you saying that does not shock me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was very much like that. And there's like that beginner tier of like, and it works for like VTubing too. There's like that beginner tier of like when you first get into something, or first get into a speedrun, or first get into a community, and you're like, you don't really know people too much. You're just trying to say hi. You're trying to be friendly. You're trying to get to know people better. There's that mid level where you're like, people kind of know who you are. You're like, you're doing some good stuff. And then there's that high level where either you've been around forever, you've put in the work, or both. And I had that weird growing pain of like transitioning from the middle to the high.
Yeah.
For that exact reason.
And it being an inherently competitive scene where, yes, these other folks see you gunning for their records, and it's like, well, I don't want to share secrets with this guy. I don't want to, let him know. And especially when it's the type of thing where, like, you have friends who might have discoveries and that you all, that, you know, like you mentioned when you found the glitch in Final Fantasy VII Remake, that you were already coordinating with others and you were able to work together there. But at the same time, if you're the first to have that, that gives you a bit of a leg up on things. And that those who might not be as friendly can be prone, I would suppose, to, having not so stellar mindsets.
Yeah, it's actually crazy that you say that specifically, like sharing tech or sharing skips and things like that. Because it happened a couple times in FF7 Remake where people were trying to be like sly and like not share their tech or not share their information. And like people would be like, why isn't this person talking in the community? Or why is this person like keeping to themselves? Like, why aren't they like communicating with everybody else? I always hated that personally. I've always been the kind of person that's like, make knowledge public. Like, if you find something that's big, that changes the game, that changes quality of life, that makes things better, that makes things easier, tell people. Like we're here to, like, you're not going to be the best you can possibly be unless you have others around you that are also the best they can be, pushing you to improve. And
I agree with that statement in every walk of life. Like, I don't care if it's VTubing, if it's business, if it's just, in general, that, that right there of you can't be the best you can be unless everyone else around you is being the best they can be too, I think is such a good mindset to have.
Because it creates competition is the big thing. And like for speedrunning, that's great. Because obviously it's already a very competitive activity. We're all trying to be best. We're trying to be fast. We're trying to have our friends, like we're trying to beat our friends' records. We're trying to improve our own records. For things like VTubing, it's a little different. We can get into that later if you prefer. But like for speedrunning, it's like you have to help the community grow, because if you don't, then like you might miss out on stuff. Like if I didn't have people pushing me to be like my best self or like helping me with tech and things like that, I wouldn't have found that other glitch. There's no way. And then maybe nobody would have found it.
And like I said, and that's when it's in an environment that is inherently competitive and that there is going to be an actual literal winner at some point in time versus, VTubing and all these other walks of life where no, there's not actually a winner, or that it doesn't need to be a competition, and that, hopefully that type of support is going to be a bit more intuitive. But as with all things in life, sadly, that is not always the reality.
Unfortunately, yeah. Sometimes it gets really negative, sometimes it gets really toxic, because competition, while it does breed ingenuity, it can also breed negative personalities, and people can take advantage and be toxic and just be not fun to be around, which is really unfortunate, because well, you expect everybody to like strive to the same goal because you're all working towards the same thing, but like there's a couple of people that just don't see it the same way.
Like we said earlier, being a little bit older in this community means that we've been around the block a couple more times, and that I think we both at this point in time have come to understand that yes, what is the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy mindset, and at the same time, you also acknowledge that inevitably you're going to encounter those with unhealthy mindsets, and just you figure out how best to deal with them, and hopefully you don't deal with them, and that you can't force everyone to be a good person. You just need to figure out, all right, how do I keep it so that I am dealing with as many good people as possible, and how do I be a good person myself?
The other big thing I think for that, and I think this one especially branches into the VTubing community, you cannot be friends with everybody. No. Nor should you be.
No.
And nor does everybody want to be friends with you. So it's very hypocritical to expect everybody to want to be friends with you when you don't want to be friends with everybody. And that's okay. It's okay to not want to be friends with everybody. And speedrunning especially, like we saw it a bunch with like, hey, we're just sharing tech. Like we're not really friends. Like we're just running the same game and trying to improve and help each other. But we're not really friends. Like we're rivals, or we're competitors, or we're just in the same sphere. VTubing is exactly the same. Like I have tons of people that I would consider associates or mutuals, like on Twitter or on Twitch. But there are tons of people that I'm not friends with, even though we're friendly towards each other in public and things like that, we don't hang out. We run in different social circles. We want different things out of VTubing, we want different things out of content creation, or we're just at different levels of our content creation journey. There are some people that are doing way better. There are some people that are doing way worse. There are some people that are bigger, some people that are smaller, but it's different for everybody.
And it's this particular conversation is not one that I have a ton on the show, but I think it is one that is timely and relevant. Obviously, with all this said, that for me, as someone who has designed their channel, who has designed their content completely around collaborations, I find myself in a very interesting and admittedly delicate position with that concept at large, because it is the type of thing that as a host, I want to be as friendly with as many people as possible. That, there's so many incredible people in this community, so many people that I would love to have on the show, so many people that I deeply respect. And would I like to become friends with folks? Sure, hell yeah. But can I say, am I friends with every single person who has been on my show? No, goodness no. That when the way that I operate and my goal first and foremost, I have never tried to be the biggest and the best interview show in the VTuber community. All I want is that if my name comes up in conversation and somebody says, oh, Vtuber Talk, oh, Jay from Vtuber Talk, that someone can say, oh yeah, he's an all right guy. He's cool. You can go on a show and have a good time. And that I'm not necessarily looking to be friends with everybody. My goal is to offend and make as few enemies as possible. That just, like you said, you can't be friends with everybody. You shouldn't be friends with everybody.
Agreed.
And just my goal is do no harm, or do, inevitably, some personalities might not blend well. Sometimes, people are imperfect. I might make a mistake. I might say or do something that unintentionally upsets someone. That's gonna happen.
Yep.
And I, try as I might to not. I've probably done that somewhere along the line. I don't know if I have. That, maybe I offended someone, they just haven't talked to me since, and whatever. But it's the type of thing that it's a delicate thing for me, and I've always tried my best to just, you go at your own flow. And it's the type of thing that I will sometimes invite folks on the show, and some folks will bounce back to me and say, hey, I'll pass, thank you anyways. Some folks just never respond, and, that's okay. That's okay. And I guess this is all to say, while I am not a VTuber myself, I very much recognize this struggle, because I did not intentionally create the situation, but I recognized after the fact, oh wait, I have put myself in one of the worst possible situations for something like this.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in when you rely on collaboration. Because you run into the issue of, are people watching me for the content that I'm doing, or are they watching me because of the guests that I have on? And unfortunately, there's never like a good way of knowing.
I know full well the vast majority of people watch me for the people I have on. And the thing is, that's all right with me. And part of it is because I very deliberately started VTuber Talk with no intention or goal of this being a full-time thing, of this growing. My channel's not monetized, but deliberately. And part of that is also my attempt to do no harm, and to, while, like I said, I recognize I can't be friends with everyone, to, I suppose, show goodwill. That for a time, for the first year of VTuber Talk, I had a donation link, and it was 50% of any donation that came in went to the guest that was on the air when it came in, period. Did that for the first year, got a handful of donations, very, very small amount. I had my first anniversary charity marathon in January, took down the donation link so I could put up the charity donation link. And after that marathon, I didn't put my donation link back up. And that's okay. And that's where I plan to keep it, frankly.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's totally fair.
And part of that is respect for the guests, and recognizing that they are spending their time, one of the most valuable resources ever, to be on my show. That I the last thing I would want is to think that I'm using them for financial gain. And sorry, I've made this ramble about me. You're the guest, damn it. I need to get off this. But bottom line is, there's a lot of different stuff in different communities, and things can be a struggle. But you find your way, you figure out what you want, and you figure out what is the best way for you to do something that is healthy and productive, and ideally, like I said, do no harm.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyways, terribly sorry to,
You're good.
hog that, but
Your show.
So bouncing back, rewinding a little bit. So we got on to all that from speedrunning. Obviously that is something that you've moved on, and I guess that lines up then sort of pretty well with the start of your VTubing journey. And like we mentioned at the top of the show, you have Cup of Dusk. Where did that concept initially come from? That did the idea of starting a talk show is a more deliberate one than just saying, hey, I want to stream, or that I want to do just chatting, but the setting out to have folks on. And we've already said how you then found improv being a good focus of it. But where did Cup of Dusk start?
So this is going to be a longer roundabout type story.
By all means. I just had a roundabout of my own. You take one, sir.
It will get to the point though. So I started PNG tubing in like May, June-ish. I say June because it's just easier to pick that because I don't exactly remember when I started PNG tubing. It was in that realm though. And this was after I had reached like ultimate burnout from speedrunning. I think I still had 1 or 2 records at the time. I was feeling defeated. I was feeling burnout. I noticed that my numbers felt relatively stagnant, especially because my numbers were great when I speedran FF7 Remake, but as soon as I switched into something else, they were garbage. So I felt like I pigeonholed myself and that I couldn't do anything except for speedrun, which is a big problem with speedrunning. It's why when you look at speedrunning, the people that do it the best are the people that can rotate between things. I'm talking about Bakba Soup, an Eternal Enigma, Maxi Lobes, Distortion 2. There's a lot of great speedrunning entertainment people that are in like the higher echelon of tiers when it comes to streaming, not just speedrunning, but streamers that can do it well. After I had the burnout, I knew I needed a sort of escape and a clean break from speedrunning and into a different form of content creation. Mind you, leading up to that point, I had been facecam streaming for almost 4 years. I had a long history of trying various different types of content. I'd done speedrunning. I did a lot of Smash at one point. I did a cooking and baking channel. I did Power Ranger reviews. I did anime reviews. I did a lot of different types of content because I was trying to find what was my niche. I was trying to find what was mine, what I could share with my community. But unfortunately, I kind of just kept falling back on speedrunning because it was not easier, but it's where my views were, and I didn't know how to translate that. So after the burnout, I knew I needed to clean break, and I saw VTubing was starting to pick up. This was, like April, May of like 2021. So like this is already after the big boom of VTubing. VShojo was in full swing. Niji Sanji and Hololive were both doing their big things. But I'd seen friends of mine that were also speedrunners, specifically Kyos Little Monster, was getting very much into VTubing. And I kind of followed suit. I watched some other VTubers. I was watching Evanito, who introduced me to a ton of other VTubers. I was watching Iron Mouse. I was watching Takahata 101. I was watching Shoto when he was still a PNG tuber. And those encounters and those experiences inspired me to start VTubing because I saw it as a way to reinvent myself. So I did, and I dove into VTubing. And unfortunately, I dove into like the worst series of mistakes you can make as a new VTuber, because I thought when I came in, I made certain connections with people, and I made the assumption that the VTubing community was overtly sexual and down bad and everything like that. And sure, people can play that up and have fun with it, and it can be your content, and you can be an SFW or NSFW content creator and everything like that. But I made this assumption that everybody was, and as well that I assumed that every VTuber kind of like knew each other, or was kind of like we were all in our own cliques. So like I did the very like awkward thing of sliding into people's DMs and asking for collabs, even though I had never actually spoken to them before. I made very overly flirtatious comments to people, sometimes egregious, sometimes, basic and harmless. But still, the breaking point of that, again, because I realized after, God, what was it, 4 months? Let's go June to October. There we go, 4 months of doing PNG tubing and then my first model. I realized that I never really made my own personality. I hadn't really developed my own content. I was literally just falling into the crowds and doing what everybody else was doing. And it came to a point where a friend told me specifically, "Hey Roy, some of the comments you've made have made me very uncomfortable." And I immediately like had like a step back moment of like realization and self-reflection of going, "Wow, I really have not done anything on my own. I was just saying this because I thought it was something that was acceptable because I see everybody else doing it." And that's not an excuse. That's a terrible reasoning to do it. But from there, I was like, something has to change.
Yeah, the
Um,
realization is what's important there.
Yes. And I don't think I would have made it unless that friend said it to me. And I've kept them anonymous for a while. I have had them on the cafe. We're on good terms now.
That's
Um,
good. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, it's not. I'm glad and very thankful of them that they came to me, and expressed it to me in a private matter. That way, I could have the chance to grow and realize it, because I didn't realize that it wasn't acceptable. And I still think it's a problem with the VTubing community that a lot of new content creators think that it's okay, because there's that stigma of like, oh, XYZ is being, lewd. It means I should be lewd back to them and flirt and say some really, really horny stuff to them. And it's like, whoa,
Mm.
you don't know that person. Like, that's not okay. So moving from there to like November, December, I started kind of having like an identity crisis, but realized that I had to do something on my own. And much throughout my own life and my own content creation career, I found that I fell very much into crowds a lot. That I didn't really try and branch out and didn't try to do my own thing. I was following the flow, and I knew from there that I needed my own place, that I needed my own content, that I needed my own rhythm, and taking inspiration from people like Takahata 101. Very obviously, since I've been compared to him a ton, I wanted to make a cafe. I saw tons of bars, I saw tons of nightclubs and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with them, but I at least wanted to have a place that I could call my own. I love coffee, love tea, love sweets, love baking. So I was like, all right, cafe. The initial idea for this was to incorporate my love for baking and cooking and coffee and things like that, because I mentioned I ran a cooking and baking channel back in the day when I was doing regular content creation. And I initially wanted to bring on guests and then talk about maybe their favorite foods, maybe something cultural that they enjoyed. If they were of a certain ethnicity or of a certain background, I could try and make that food. We could discuss it, kind of break bread, literally, and just talk about the significance of food in their life. And the first episode did not turn out like that, and then the second episode even more so moved further away from that and more into improv sketch comedy. Which
Now, was this because, I guess, did that approach just perhaps not click, or did you end up just falling into those other things, the improv comedy, and things went from there that did, I suppose, a what part of it didn't really go according to plan?
So with the first guest that I had, Meneki K, we had like planned questions and like content, and we planned pretty much everything out. I had very specific things that I had like kind of structured to it, and it's not that it felt bad, and there were good moments too, and I still look back at it fondly and remember having a good time, but it felt like it was lacking something, like it was missing that oomph.
Hmm.
And when I had Prism come on and we kind of like, we fooled around a little bit for like the first like 20 or 30 minutes, but then like I mentioned before, at some point I just felt like a switch flip, and I just dove headlong into the improv with her, and it felt right. And it felt like I had found something that I hadn't experienced before, or at least not experienced a lot of, and I knew that it was a direction that I wanted to take it, because it was fun, it was engaging. The audience, like my viewership, seemed to really enjoy it too. We got more chat interaction, so then we could bounce off of them. And then I repeated it, and again and again and again, still trying to chase that high or that feeling of accomplishment. And I found it a bunch of times. Sure, I failed a bunch of times too, and I couldn't find it a couple times. But it at least helped me to understand that that was what I wanted to do. By failing so many times over that previous 5-year span or 4.5-year span, I had realized that this is what I wanted to do. And it took me that long to realize it, but failing to that point and meeting all these people and having those awkward encounters of making people feel not well and having to tell me in private, it led me to that moment. And that is where the cup of dust came from.
Okay, that's really cool that it wound up coming full circle here with several of my questions, because obviously we started with, okay, how'd you get into the improv comedy? And that question from me came from, all right, I recognize this was not the initial concept from Cup of Dust, but then asking where'd Cup of Dust come from, I suppose maybe I should have anticipated that they would have connected that way. I didn't, but as you were telling me, it was like, oh, of course that adds up.
Yep. It all comes back together after a while.
So that's really cool, and that the whole thing of it, like you said, it's a learning process.
Yes.
And yeah, you made some mistakes along the way. I've made mistakes along the way, and that if you were able to grow and if you were able to learn, if you were able to genuinely apologize and say, hey, I recognize where I messed up here, that you can keep moving forward, and it's very clear that you've done that.
Yeah, it's a journey, and I know a lot of people like to say VTubing, especially in content creation, is a marathon disguised as a sprint, because it's both.
Oh yeah.
But there's always stuff that you're gonna learn, and when you first start out, I think, and I say this a lot because I try and do content clinics now where I explain this stuff, but the big thing that a lot of people don't understand is that you learn more from your failures than you do your successes.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that's for most things in life. That's not just content creation.
Yeah, but it's important to fail. But the important part of that is to be willing to fail. Because there are so many VTubers that I talk to, either new or old, or just scared of changing what they're doing. And they're just like, what if it doesn't work? And I'm like, okay, well, is what you're doing right now working? They're like, oh, well, I'm not really doing anything. I'm like, then just do it. Like, the worst that's going to happen is going to fail. And then you learn not to do that. Exactly. And that's just a big thing that it's very telling from my perspective, at least. Who is a content creator who has what it takes to make it is that willingness to fail. And if they're not willing to fail and they're cautious and they're like, well, I don't really want to do that, I'm just going to follow what everybody else is doing, I don't think they're going to make it. I'm going to be perfectly frank. There have been so many VTubers that I've talked to and people that I don't talk to anymore that I entered the VTubing sphere with, that I'm now not really in contact anymore because of that. Because they kind of got like stuck in what they were doing and they didn't want to experiment. They didn't branch out. They didn't try something new.
Yeah. And that, again, is something that really applies to a lot of things in life, that whether it be business, that what are the historically biggest businesses, the products that end up becoming just world changing, the folks that took a chance, the folks that went outside of the box to try something new, because when you find something new that people like or want or need, that's when you get traction, that's when you get success. Yeah.
I was gonna say, funny thing about that too is it doesn't even have to be something new, it just has to be something new for you. So like for me, running the cafe and doing improv sketch comedy, I've said it 1,000 times, Takahata 101, huge inspiration for me. Obviously my content is very similar to his. I feel like we still have our own flavors in what we do, and I very much believe that even though we do similar content, it is very different because of who we are as people.
Yeah.
Is it new content? No. Having a talk show, especially as a VTuber, has been done tons of times before. Or having an interview, or having a setting, a bar, a cafe, a studio, a club. It has been done to death. There are tons of people that do it. But the difference is you, the content creator, and being willing to try something. It doesn't have to be new, but it being new to you and you putting your own twist on it is the big important thing.
Yeah. And that, like, for me, and obviously I'm somewhat of an anomaly even within the VTuber community, because I'm not a VTuber. I have VTuber in the name, I have VTuber in the show name, but I am just a disembodied voice. The whole reason that VTuber Talk exists is because I was bored. I had too much time on my hands in 2020 and 2021 because outside of my day job, I do event work. And events sure as hell weren't happening in 2020 and 2021, let me tell you.
I gotcha.
And that's part of how I got into VTubing. I'll fast forward through that whole thing. But basically, I realized I wanted to do something. I had never streamed before. I had streamed with friends on friends' channels for various things, but never actually run my own show. But I've run a lot of live events and I've done different things of that sort. And I'd like to think that I'm all right at talking and holding a conversation. And I had seen a guy named Gary Whitta host a talk show called Animal Talking in Animal Crossing. Like, Gary Whitta is actually a Hollywood writer. He wrote the script for Book of Eli and Star Wars Rogue One, among others.
Okay.
He actually wound up getting coverage in Variety, and just like he had mainstream press coverage. He had Brie Larson, Josh Gad, Phil Spencer, a lot of AAA names on his show, and it became appointment viewing for me. And then down the line, when I realized I wanted to do something in the VTubing community but not be a VTuber, that's sort of how this idea came along. But also at the same time, the big thing that I want to tie into your talk of everything of figuring out how to do something that is uncomfortable for you, do something new and different, and be able to grow in that way. That the other piece I think that is super important is defining what is success for you. Because for me, for VTuber Talk, I went into this with the very deliberate mindset of I don't want to do this full time. I don't want to make this a source of income for me. This is a passion project for fun for me because I like talking to people. I like getting stories. I love sharing stories. I love entertaining. And even if I don't have a big audience, if I can engage my guests, if I can make my guests light up and get them to talk about something that's important to them that they love, that's success for me.
Okay.
And that has been the story of VTuber Talk, because I sure as hell don't do a whole bunch of things that a content creator looking for numbers and traction and growth should do. I don't have a Discord server. I don't do a whole bunch on Twitter. I only deal in collabs, which if you're trying to grow as a content creator, that's wrong.
Yeah,
don't do what I'm 100%. Doing. Do not follow my example, folks, if you're looking to grow. The only reason that I'm doing what I'm doing and the way I'm doing it is because this is the goal for me. This is what is fun for me. And that if I can have one person on a week and have a good conversation with them for a couple hours, and at the end of those couple of hours, they can say to me, I enjoyed that couple of hours. I think that was worth my time. That is everything to me. That is what I want. That is what I strive for. And I don't look at anything else. I don't care about the numbers. Like I said, the channel's not monetized. I recognize that that is an anomaly in goals. If you're, like I said, if you're looking for more conventional content creation success, do not do what I do, folks. But at the same time, I'm content because what I have right now is the goal.
Sure. Absolutely.
But going on to a couple other things, like I said, I like getting people to light up. And one of the things that I'm very open about is that while this show, for all intents and purposes, is improv, that, we spoke earlier in this week, and I'm very open that I do speak with my guests before the show. And that we, put down some ideas. Sometimes we run with certain things that we said we might talk about speedrunning. I didn't think we'd talk about it as much as we did. I didn't think we'd get into this whole content creation discussion, because that's not normally what I talk about, but it felt like that was something that you enjoy talking about, so I decided to follow along that thread. A couple other things that I know you really enjoy talking about. Trying to decide, which one do I want to go with? Because it's one I don't get to talk about a lot. You love Power Rangers. You love Tokusatsu, Roy.
I do.
And I was watching, you actually did one of your recent videos on YouTube was you reacting to a Watch Mojo list of the top 20 Power Rangers episodes, and you just having a ball with that. And it was the type of thing that watching that it is so clear how much you love that series, because as you were watching, one, not only were you calling half the list ahead of time, but the commentary you were making alongside it there was so much insider baseball there. And that's the thing, that even though I am not super into Power Rangers or Tokusatsu, it's something that I very obviously am aware of and understand how much it means to so many people. And I love seeing and hearing people talk insider baseball, because usually there's enough that you can intuitively figure out, okay, this is what they're talking about. But when they get into that point, people only do that for things that they love.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, for you, what are some of your, like, give me your top 5 favorite Power Rangers episodes or arcs that you mentioned a whole bunch that you felt, had to be on the list, but for you, your personal enjoyment, like, hit me. Just go wild, man. Do not worry about jargon.
Yeah. Countdown to Destruction, I think, is still probably the greatest episode of Power Rangers, or the greatest, like, multi-parter of Power Rangers to exist. It is the culmination of almost a decade of what Power Rangers led into, and it represented everything that the franchise stood for at that point, which is that anybody could be a Power Ranger. And it was such a very powerful message, and I still think it's some of the best writing they've ever done for the franchise. The stakes were super real. The Earth got invaded. The Rangers lost like 4 times in a row. The bad guys seemed to have the upper hand. Zordon, who was, the previous mentor to all of the Ranger teams, up to that point had been kidnapped and was being held hostage. Like, everything was as high stakes as it could have been. But
it felt like by today's standards, Avengers Endgame of Power Rangers.
Yes. So then, we had an Iron Man snap situation where they sacrificed Zordon, and it was a very real moment. It felt tangible. We'd spent the past 7 years, 7-8 years, something like that, with Zordon as a very real character, mentoring teenagers with attitude. We'd spent the past 7 or 8 years with Bulk and Skull, especially as comic relief, then stepping up and standing up for normal people that were around them. That's like the ultimate one. And that's always something.
As an outsider, like I said, the inside baseball and me sort of adding 2 and 2, that Bulk and Skull, I take it, are antagonists, that they seem like something between schoolyard bullies, possibly proper antagonists, but these are obviously folks that are, under normal circumstances, not friendly with the Rangers or their alter egos.
Yeah, so from like season 1, they're introduced as like the bullies. They are introduced as like the bumbling idiots, like they're not nice, they pick on the Rangers, they pick on everybody. They're like those very stereotypical, very comical bullies. And that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be comic relief, they're supposed to be bumbling, they're supposed to be stupid, like those types of things. And then we get to season 2 and we see a little bit of growth. Then we get to season 3 and we see a little bit of growth. And then seeing that over the course of like I said, 7 or 8 years, get to Power Rangers in Space and get to the conclusion of it, we get to see them sticking up for people they've never met, and swearing that they're Power Rangers even though they're not. And it's very much like a message that I think the franchise has always done a really good job about, and especially in that moment, it was that anybody can be a Power Ranger. It just means that you need to stand up for the right thing in that situation. Like you when you're given the chance, when the calling happens, if you rise to the occasion, you can be a Ranger. And seeing Bulk and Skull, of all people, rise to that situation is what I think the crux and the point of the franchise has always been about.
Yeah, that when you see, like you said, of all people, for these bullies, effectively, for these bumbling guys, that if they can do it, anyone can do it.
Exactly.
Also, Think Smallcraw, thank you for the follow. And Miss Doom, welcome on in. Good to see ya.
Miss Doom, hello!
Yes, I had Miss Doom on actually just a couple days ago.
Hey, okay, good to know.
Yeah, absolute delight. Still available as of time of broadcast here on Twitch, but it'll be up on YouTube soon enough as well.
But yeah, Power Rangers has always been like that for me. If I had to pick other episodes though, I feel like, funny enough, the top 5 is not actually that bad. From the
yeah, you were in relative agreement with most of them. That you use the title of, like, what was it, Watch Mojo like ruins Power Rangers, which
that's clickbait.
I can that's
clickbait.
You do what you need to do to get those clicks on YouTube. I do not begrudge people from using clickbait titles.
yeah. The other episodes that I like, I think are just like standouts. Green with Evil, is where they introduce Tommy, the Mighty Morphin Green Ranger, who I know tons of people to this day will fight and defend. I think Tommy as a Green Ranger is terrible. I think him as the White Ranger is significantly better. But that 5-parter in the original season of Mighty Morphin is really good storytelling. And even though that season is a lot of trial and error, that is one of the things that they trialed and succeeded in. And it's a very fun 5-parter. Dr. K was another big one where instead of diving into like Ranger backstories, which they did in that season in Power Rangers RPM, we got to see a background for their mentor character, and it was visceral. It was dark. It was real. It was you could feel the emotion, and I mean like the acting was really good in that season, and that definitely led a lot of credit to it. But like the storytelling for it was fantastic. What other really big ones? Forever Red is just a great team up episode because you get to see the past 10 years, 15 years, something like that, of Rangers teaming up for one fight. The finale of it wasn't that great, but the fact that we got to see all of them come together and fight in one situation, and it was American made and not something Japanese made, was awesome, because it showed that, you know, America could at least still create good original Power Rangers content.
Something actually really interesting there with the American made versus Japanese made.
Sure.
And obviously, Power Rangers is Super Sentai, which is a Japanese property, and at least for a chunk of the series localization in the West, that a lot of the fight scenes, and do correct me if I'm saying anything incorrect here, but from what I understand, that a good chunk of the fight scenes and other pieces where the Rangers are masked was ported directly over from what was recorded in Japan. And obviously, anytime that you have the actual actors themselves and, you know, any of the dialogue that was recorded while they are, masked in their Ranger outfits was done in English, but that they recycled a lot of that footage, and that it was the quote-unquote human element were the only ones that were actually recorded because, you know, you already had the fight scenes done, which is a really cool way to do production, and something that is very rare, that not many types of localizations, that usually you will either just have something that is dubbed over, or you will have something that is redone, remade from the ground up. But to have it, you know, almost half and half is unorthodox, to say the least.
Yeah, Power Rangers literally started as that. So the fact that it is still like that to this day is very much like a lending to the production staff and creators like skill and being able to splice these things together. Obviously, in the first couple seasons, it was rough. Like season 1, obviously there were growing pains and things like that. Season 2 especially was bad because they didn't want to ditch the original suits because they realized they had, you know, struck gold. Season 3, things got a lot better because they found ways to make it cleaner. And then by season 4, they realized they couldn't keep doing what they had done before, that it had become too expensive, and they started adopting more of the Japanese footage instead of making original American stuff. But it's funny because as the franchise has gone on, you can usually tell. 99% of the time, you can tell when you're watching something that was filmed in Japan versus something that was filmed in America. And whether it be set pieces, whether it be filming technique, whether it be storytelling technique with the camera work, or even sometimes just inclusion of characters, like Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue had a whole other Ranger created specifically for that season. Yeah. So
I remember that from the video, that it was the Platinum Ranger, correct?
Titanium Ranger.
Titanium Ranger.
Yeah. But it's always interesting to see the difference. And now, at least, because, you know, we're almost 30 years into the franchise, it'll be 30 years next year. It's very interesting to see how far it's come and how much footage they can use and how much they can't, and the difference between them. Because, like, as much as I enjoy a lot of the American style stuff, like the Japanese style stuff, like, they have their stuff down, you know?
How much of the series have you seen twice over, being, you know, seen the American release, but also seen the original Japanese release?
So I've seen all of Power Rangers that exist currently, but for Super Sentai, I've only seen as far back as Jetman, which was about 1991, and seen as far as the beginning of Hurricaneger, which is like 2002. Which is like, I think it's like 10 seasons or so, 11 seasons maybe.
That's nothing to scoff at.
No. It's like baby numbers when it comes to Super Sentai. But it's still a lot for probably your average viewer, because Super Sentai started in 75. You know, like
Yeah.
it's been around for a while.
It is a legendary franchise, and obviously it has. I would argue that it doesn't have quite the Western pedigree or just recognition that it had in like the late 90s, early 2000s, but it now has, I would say, an even stronger cult following of folks who grew up with it, like you, who are now really, really into it and do follow it faithfully. The Power Rangers was a really big thing when I was growing up. It, like I said, was not something I was into personally, but it's something I've been aware of. But for how big it is, and don't get me wrong, even if I feel it might not have the mainstream showing that it did back in the day, it's still very big here. But it is an icon in Japan. Super Sentai
Yeah.
in Japan is huge.
Yeah. I would almost argue, and I would check the numbers just to make sure myself make sure
Yeah,
that
and
I'm right.
I could be wrong on my gut feeling there. I could absolutely be wrong.
But Kamen Rider, I believe, is bigger in Japan than Super Sentai is. And Kamen Rider's been around since 71. Kamen Rider had the weird thing that it was brought over to the US twice by different companies. So first was Masked Rider in the mid 90s, which was an adaptation of Kamen Rider Black RX, and it did really poorly, like really, really poorly. And basically, Haim Saban, who was the owner of the stock footage and dealing with Toei for the stock footage, was like, we're not going to do it again because it just didn't work. But we also saw soirees into other pieces of tokusatsu, which is the umbrella term for Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, Ultraman, Metal Heroes, things like that.
Mass transforming heroes.
Yes, basically. But we saw it again with Big Bad Beetleborgs and VR Troopers, which were two other soirees into trying to adapt more stuff that Toei had, because they had access to the footage and everything like that. But Kamen Rider failed with Masked Rider, and then another company tried it later with Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, which was Kamen Rider Ryuki, I believe, which also did really poorly in the US because they didn't really know how to market it, because it's the weird thing for Japan is what they allow their children to see is very different from what the US allows their children to see.
Yeah, cultural differences are a thing.
Yeah. We see it a lot in Super Sentai, like where plots would be changed just so they wouldn't be as dark. But like Kamen Rider has always had that like twinge of more darkness or more quote unquote realism to it, because like they don't have the giant growing monsters, it's just people in suits fighting. So like, because there's not that sense of mysticism, they've delved into a lot darker plot lines where more people end up dying or more people end up injured, and it feels more real. And Kamen Rider just has never found footing in the US in terms of adaptation for that. But the US audience for like Kamen Rider from Japan is massive, and I would honestly say it's probably bigger than Super Sentai. Even though Power Rangers had such a huge cultural impact here in the US, I would think that Kamen Rider is bigger. And even though I'm not into it and I haven't gotten that far yet, I would guess that. Even like you even hear people like Iron Mouse talking about it constantly, about tokusatsu, and 9 times out of 10 that she's talking about things when it comes to tokusatsu, it's Kamen Rider.
Yeah.
She very, very rarely, unless it's maybe Gokaiger, does she talk about Super Sentai, unless she's singing the opening themes. But usually it's Kamen Rider.
Yeah, that among my friends who are really into tokusatsu, that Kamen Rider is definitely the name that I hear more often than Power Rangers. And as somebody who is not as well versed, for a while I thought they were synonymous, and it wasn't until a couple years ago that I actually realized, oh no, wait, that these are similar but very distinct.
Yep. Under the tokusatsu umbrella, but distinct under the tokusatsu umbrella.
Yeah.
Like, technically the tokusatsu umbrella encompasses things like Godzilla as well. It's complicated.
And it just, for Power Rangers in particular, that the sprawling lore and the crossovers, that it almost feels like a combination of like something akin to Marvel meets Doctor Who, because you have these teams that are individuals, but Doctor Who, you have the reincarnations and everything, and that you have these new iterations of these teams because you have all these different Red Rangers, the Pink Ranger, the Blue
Yeah.
Ranger, the Green Ranger. But they are distinct people. But then you have these different timelines, these different worlds, and sometimes these big crossover events, like you were mentioning, but also these very big, sprawling storylines that span years and years and years.
So sadly, it's not the case anymore. It used to be the case where it was like that. That's why I was talking so highly about Countdown to Destruction and how great it was in that sense, and Forever Red to some capacity, where it felt like they were working on concurrent storylines leading to a centralized finish, or like maybe they had figured it out like halfway through. But the problem is that in the early 2000s, Haim Saban sold the rights to Power Rangers to Disney, who initially had no plans of continuing the franchise. It was only after they realized how popular it was in other countries aside from the US that they were like, you know what, maybe we'll consider it. And then they moved production to New Zealand, where it still is today, because it's significantly cheaper. The problem with that is because it went from Haim Saban to Disney, Disney wanted to make it clear that they were doing their own thing. So, like, the storylines connecting stopped.
That you ended up having, basically, there was the Star Wars EU situation.
It wasn't that disconnected, but it still felt like it. Because, like, seasons are after the Power Rangers in Space, the Countdown to Destruction, like I said, we had one more season after that, Lost Galaxy, that felt like it kind of wrapped things up and still tied within. But even after that, which was still with Haim Saban, we had Lightspeed Rescue, had nothing to do with anything of the previous seasons. And I would almost guarantee that it was just getting too convoluted to keep writing for that long, because like a 10+ year storyline is kind of difficult to do.
Yeah, sometimes you get these big long things, and from a creative standpoint, sometimes a hard reset is just what you need anyways. And I suppose I can appreciate that under new ownership, if you're not working with the same writing team, that you're going to look at it and say, we don't know what to do with all this, and we feel like we either A, would do something that the fans really, really wouldn't like with where it was going, or or that we might miss details because we're not the ones that wrote it, so let's just not.
Yeah, and that is what happened with Power Rangers, because it went from Saban to Disney, and then Disney kind of fumbled it really badly, even though there were some great seasons with Disney. Then they sold the rights back to Saban in the late 2010 or the late 2000s, and then we got another series of Saban, which were none of them were particularly good except maybe Dino Charge, and then Saban sold the rights again to Hasbro, who is currently running it. But because of when they sold it and how they sold it, it tied Hasbro's hands. So Hasbro has been super restricted in the way that they've been able to storytell, and only just recently cut ties with Nickelodeon, which is fantastic. And we're all the Power Rangers fans are collectively cheering about it, that we're on Netflix now. But it leads into a lot of complicated stuff. The franchise is very muddy. Continuity is very muddy. It's very complicated. There are things that just don't make sense. There's tons of plot holes everywhere, but it happens. You know, we're spanning literally 4 different major companies.
Yeah, 4 major companies, 4 decades. And this is part of why I enjoy hearing people talk about Power Rangers and Super Sentai, because even as someone who doesn't have that personal connection, that it is one of the most fascinating media franchises out there, partially because it has changed hands, partially because of just the sprawling storytelling and iterative nature of it all, that it is so simple yet so complex. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the aim of any given Power Ranger season is such that a newcomer can tune into any season and have it be their first season. That's fine.
Yep.
But if you are a long-standing fan, that there might be Easter eggs, or that when these crossovers happen, if they happen, that you're able to get it that much more. But even if you are a newcomer, that nothing of significance will be lost in it. And it does take some very creative writing to do that. That, you know, the only other ones that are able to really, really do that, I think, in terms of making it continuously feel accessible, because there's a lot of different franchises that sprawl and sprawl and sprawl and do these complex storylines, but that don't remain perpetually accessible.
Yeah.
I feel like the ones that have been able to nail that balance are Doctor Who and Pokemon.
Ooh. Pokemon's an interesting one, but I guess it's, yeah, they basically just do a reset every season
Yeah,
because they change art
they just
styles.
they do pretty much a hard reset in that, you can pick up any
Yeah.
Pokemon game, any Pokemon season,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
have it be your first, and that's fine. I think that's
yeah.
partially why it's been able to become such a long-standing cultural icon, because there's going to be folks who pick up Scarlet and Violet next month as their first game, and
Yep.
they're going to become lifelong fans. And
Yep.
that's one of the things that I love as a diehard Pokemon fan myself, that for everything I don't know about Sentai and Tokusatsu, I know Pokemon, and I love how accessible they've made that franchise, and the fact that, I know a lot of folks complain of, oh, they should make the games harder or more complex and add more stuff, and I say no. When let something survive is that the next generation is able to pick it up as easily as possible, and that getting to see kids in elementary school and middle school just love Pokemon the way that I did, it just, that fills my heart with joy in ways I cannot describe.
No, I get you. I definitely understand that. It's how I feel about Power Rangers, honestly. Because like, growing up with Power Rangers and then seeing like I'll be like at a store like a Target or something, and like seeing like a kid run down the aisles wearing like a Power Ranger mask, like running up to their parent being like, "Mom, Dad, can I get this?" And I'm like, "I remember that.
Yes!
Yeah, I remember that."
And that's the thing of just, from the late 90s through today, if you walk into a Target, a Walmart, whatever, and you go to the toy aisle, Power Rangers has been a mainstay, regardless of what has happened with the series at large. That merchandising, where the real money from the series is made. That, gosh darn, they have kept that thing going with the toys, because and that's another way of just general accessibility, and have that, because the whole thing of those toys are not built off of the lore in the series; those are built off imagination.
Yeah, it feels like there are a lot of the time, and then now, especially that Hasbro has taken over, they've been appealing a lot more to adult fans, doing like legacy themed toys of like older seasons, or making quote unquote adult cosplay props, which I've got a couple of, like helmets and weapons that are like adult sized. So it's nice to have like it's nice to have them as like nods to be like, hey, thanks to the fans that are still here,
Yeah, that is one of the things that Hasbro in particular, and I know this from the Magic the Gathering side and a couple other ones, that I'm not super into Transformers, but I know that they've done it for Transformers as well, that they have realized, oh, wait, we, for years and years and years, have marketed it to kids. And, we've that is how we have made the legacy that is Hasbro, this incredibly successful corporation. And then somewhere along the line, they realized, oh, wait a minute, who buys these things for the kids? The adults. Oh, wait, adults have money too. What if we made things for the people who had the money?
Yep. Yeah. It's they're realizing that the kids that they marketed to like years ago are now adults. And adults have money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny in that sense, in a good way, of course. But I am glad that they are willing to market to adults.
Yeah, and that's something that, like I said, we're seeing now for a lot of different franchises, where folks who have grown up with it are now able to get these cool, really special higher end things, because they might buy the normal action figures still, but they're gonna want these higher end, nicer things that a kid is not necessarily going to enjoy as much, / would not be practical for a kid.
Yeah.
But it's nice that, as adults, we're able to have nice things too.
Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned that you have a couple of these different masks. I have to ask, which Ranger?
So I've got a couple of them, but it's all the ones that they've released so far, except for Draken, who is a comic villain, which is basically they took the White Ranger mask and combined it with the Green Ranger mask. It looks dope. Love it. I want it. but I've heard it's not great in quality, and it's the only time they've like really messed up with the helmets.
Mm,
But I've got red, pink, blue, white, and Lord Zed, who is the guy that had like his musculature exposed and his brain exposed.
gotcha.
So
Rewinding a bit. So, how did you end up getting into Power Rangers? Was this just one sort of, right place, right time as a kid that you saw
Yeah.
it on TV and fell in love?
Yep. Yeah, it was definitely one of those things because like I don't want to age myself. Like I tried very hard not to. But like growing up with Power Rangers, and growing up in the booming age of video games growing, Power Rangers also had some very successful video games, specifically the beat 'em ups on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So I remember going with my my dad specifically to a local WoW video was our video store, and we rented a Super Nintendo from them and like the beat 'em up games, and they're simple. It was easy for me to play. It was easy for me to get into, and it's where I fell in love with video games as well. Was from that early age. But yeah, it was just right time. It was, hey, this is a kid show. Let your kids watch it, and man, the 90s are a wacky, zany time. Whoa! Like that kind of thing. So
Absolutely, yeah, and just it's so cool. Like even for me as an adult, as someone who wasn't into Power Rangers, hearing how many people have grown up with it and who still love it so much today, and that's the sign of something that has been truly successful and that has truly impacted lives, and that's always fun to see.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you ever had a favorite Ranger in terms of just one that either you identified with or that back in the day you remember like when you'd be playing with your friends that you always wanted to be that Ranger?
I mean, Mighty Morphin Black Ranger was always my favorite. Specifically, the second one is Johnny Young Bosch, who is a very prolific voice actor now.
Yes, he is.
So he is always my go-to. He's my favorite voice actor. He's my favorite Power Ranger. I just love everything that he does. He inspired me to love the Power Rangers franchise. He inspired me to get into voice acting, and just it's him. It's always him.
Yeah. I think of Johnny Young Bosch very much for his anime voice acting, but I know that Power Rangers is where he really made a name for himself.
Yep,
and that a lot of the subsequent work that he did is because of his performance as the Black Ranger.
Yeah. So he started as Mighty Morphin Black, that went on to Green Zeo and Green Turbo. Came back as Mighty Morphin Black like 2 more times. And then from there, he went to voicing Vash the Stampede in Trigun, and Ichigo in Bleach, and Lelouch in Code Geass, and he just didn't miss.
There was a couple of years where he was the guy in terms of like anime protagonist male actors. And
mid 2000s were like his time. Early in mid 2000s, he was everywhere. It was him and oh my god, what's his name? The voice actor that plays Spike Spiegel. I always forget his name.
Steve Bloom.
Yes. So him and Steve Bloom were just everywhere in the late 90s, early mid 2000s. And I was very fortunate for that, because as a kid and watching anime, or growing up with anime and then becoming an adult and being like, oh, I recognize these people. I watched them as a Power Ranger. And then it's like, oh, it's Ichigo, aka Lelouch, aka Vash, aka the Black Power. Like it's nice to be able to make those connections.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned that you were a voice actor yourself, I actually have included your commission link down at the bottom, and I will be doing the same thing for when this goes up on YouTube. So if you are enjoying Roy's voice and are interested, maybe consider him for your next project.
Oh God, don't listen to my voice now. It's a little raspy.
Was there a point in... What was the first time you remember saying to yourself, I want to do that. I want to do voice acting?
Watching Critical Role was probably like the first thing.
Ooh, okay.
So Critical Role was also where I fell in love with D&D, and also fell in love with improv, because I remember trying to play D&D back in high school, had very, very negative experiences with it due to my DM, so I fell off of it after like a couple sessions, and I was like, damn, like I felt like I was gonna have a lot of fun and it just didn't. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, you really like voice actors. Like, here's, Matt Mercer and, Liam O'Brien and, Travis Willingham and Laura Bailey, like, doing D&D. And I was like, what? No way. And I watched, I think it was like episode like 30. Like, I caught Critical Role very early on Twitch. And from there, I caught all of Campaign 1 and all of Campaign 2. And from that, I was like, holy shit, like, this game's great. And went to a local hobby shop. This is obviously pre-COVID. Went to local hobby shops, learned how to play D&D, learned how to DM, fell in love with improv because everything is decided by dice rolling. And just from that, going constantly and playing and practicing and learning, and then going back home and then watching them at night and seeing everything is just, and that's what made me fall in love with voice acting and with improv and with D&D.
That's so interesting because you're not wrong that all the stuff there is voice acting. D&D is not where my mind usually goes when I think of voice acting. Usually I think, voiceover and things of that sort. But at the same time, like I said, you're completely correct that every bit of performance in something like Critical Role, and if you're, even just playing your own campaign with your friends, that if you're doing anything, if there's in-character conversation, that's voice acting. That's acting.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you found, when you play D&D yourself, do you tend towards any particular class or play style, or do you just jump around?
So, unfortunately, it's been a long time since I've been able to be a player. As I learned how to be a DM, I found the curse of once you learn how to be a DM, you are a DM forever.
DM,
yeah. I did get to play, like the last time I played D&D, I was a player. And I played Cleric because our team needed a healer, and we didn't have one. Like, it wasn't even that, like, we had a bard or like a druid, and like we were okay. It was, no, we had
you just had nothing. Then
we had nothing. Yeah, we had like a sorcerer, a barbarian, and like a fighter.
You had like, damage.
We had no support. We had nothing. So I was like, all right, great. Like I'll play cleric. I'll make sure the party stays alive. And then I think I cross-classed into paladin because I had the stats for it. And it was fun, but like at the same time, it's hard. Because when you're a DM, and I'm sure Matt Mercer feels this way all the time, whenever he gets to be a player, it almost feels weird because you're not the one dictating things. But it's also that, like, when you know things are wrong or not being run correctly, you have to, like,
you have to, like, bite your tongue.
Yep. You have to let the other person make those mistakes. You have to let the other person dictate it. It's not your story. So sometimes it's hard. And sometimes it can ruin an experience, especially if you don't agree with the decision that a DM makes. So it gets hard. I would love to keep playing as a player. I just never get the chance to, especially because I don't have the time. But also because I want a very RP. Yeah, I wonder why. Woo! I wonder why. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I don't have the time.
But still, what are you if not the DM of the Cup of Dusk?
basically.
When you did DM, did you find that you had any particular style in terms of either your storytelling or the way that you wrote your campaigns?
I did a couple homebrews. The last homebrew that I ever ran was actually horror themed. But like not like in a traditional sense. And it ended very weirdly. Like, I mean, like, D&D is improv, so you have to always be ready for the curveballs. But like, literally, like, I gave the party like an option where it was very obvious they were dealing with like the big bad, and instead of like being like, no, like, you're evil and we'll come back later and defeat you, it was they joined forces with them.
Ha!
And I later asked them about it. I was like, hey, like, what led to this? And they were like, the way that you like propositioned this person, I made them a sympathetic villain and swayed the party to their side because of it. And I was like, oh,
and you like, hadn't even intended to present them that way.
Yeah, like it was supposed to be like it was supposed to be like two wrongs don't make a right, because it was like this one kingdom had like a race of people essentially that were like wrongly treated and enslaved and like used for experimentation and things like that. And then it was the big bad ended up being a member of that race that was essentially taking revenge on all the people that had wronged them. And they were like, hey, party, like, you guys aren't shitheads. You guys actually saved one of these people of this race. Come fight with us. We don't have to be enemies. Like, these people wronged us. We have history books that prove it. We have a kingdom. We're going to go make right in the world and make sure everybody knows to respect us now. Party was like, all right, bet
sure.
we're in. I was like, oh, okay, I guess campaign's over.
The end.
It's unfortunate. I would have loved to have kept running it. I just didn't have enough time because I think that's when I moved from New Jersey. So that was when I moved away.
Well, I guess on that note, you mentioned you moved from New Jersey. You moved to Texas. And one thing that I've been relatively open about is that I grew up in Maryland. I'm very proud to be from Maryland. And I also moved to Texas. And even if you don't live in Texas, you know that Texans are proud of being Texan. And I've never felt like an outsider necessarily, but it's the type of thing that when you move to Texas, you have to sort of learn things and pick things up and realize what's around here because certain things are different. You like everything from certain restaurant chains are available here that aren't, and there's a lot of different things that I think come with moving to Texas. And I have friends and family back home who ask me about it, and you're like, how is Texas? What's it like? And the biggest thing that I tell them, I say, depending on where you are in Texas, is going to have a significant impact on your experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you live in one of the major metropolitan hubs of Texas, if you live in Austin, Houston, San Antonio, or Dallas-Fort Worth, you live in Texas. And in those metropolitan areas of Texas, it can feel like most other metropolitan areas, probably with a few more Texas-shaped things.
Sure.
But that, it could feel similar even to something like Seattle, or depending on where you are, that it could feel something like Atlanta. But if you are outside an hour or so of the bubble of those 4 or 5 metropolitan hubs, you are no longer in Texas. You are in Texas. There is a difference between living in Texas and Texas.
Yeah. I can definitely feel that and understand that.
And I live in Texas, not Texas. Do you live in Texas or Texas?
I'm in Texas.
Okay. Won't ask anything past that, but I feel like that's sort of a generic enough backdrop that does make a difference for your experience.
Something like that.
And I guess for you, was there anything that surprised you in a positive way when you moved to Texas that you were like, oh, I didn't think that this would be as good as it is, or, I didn't know that there was this benefit, or, even just I discovered these restaurants, because food is something that you obviously enjoy.
So I guess it's just location. Where I am in Texas is like, I'm very lucky to have a lot of great things nearby. I'm trying to be very vague about it. I mean, like, I knew cost of living was cheaper here, so like that was a big reason. I would say that's like it. Like nothing was like hyper surprising. Maybe like the consistent heat, I guess. Like it's like surprising, but like not like it's there, and then when you experience it, I don't know. There wasn't anything crazy.
I suppose that, I guess, I think for me what was most surprising was that things weren't as surprising as I thought they might be.
Yeah, that's probably a big one.
That, like I said, people asked what's it like living in Texas, and I said, well, I grew up in a suburban area near cities, and I now live in a suburban area near cities. And it's like, it's actually surprisingly the same, that, there's a lot of restaurants nearby. There's shops, and that basically anything I could want is within 20 minutes. Things are a bit more spread out in the area, but apart from that, it's pretty simple. As for the question of, how do you handle the Texas heat? Because you are right, it is consistently hot. And the answer is incredibly simple. Don't go outside.
Yeah, literally. Like, people ask me that all the time. Like, oh, how you doing with the heat? And I'm like, what heat? I'm inside.
Yeah.
Like, it's hot outside, but like, I'm inside.
Yeah.
But I do want to say on that note, would you mind if we take a 5-minute break just so I can
Oh,
use the bathroom?
By all means, yeah, go right ahead, my friend.
All right, great. I will be right back.
Yeah, that in the meantime, I'll vamp a little bit. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you all are enjoying yourself so far. That if for some crazy reason you aren't already, please do follow Roy. I'm going to make sure that he gets a shout out. Royzoga. And you can catch Royzoga over on Twitch and Twitter. The links are right there at the bottom of the screen. I will be snipping this part out of the VOD most likely, just for a little bit of consistency there. But hope you all are enjoying that. I run these shows approximately once a week. The dates and times can vary pretty wildly. That I do try to get the scheduling to fit my guest, and that just means things will go where they are most available. Tonight wound up being actually a little bit later than usual, but frankly, I do enjoy having later night shows. That it means I have more time in the afternoons to get some other stuff done. And I don't know, the late night talk show, actually being a late night talk show, is a fun vibe for sure. But hopefully folks are enjoying. And like I said, if you're not following Roy, definitely be sure to as well. If you're interested in following me, that obviously right here on Twitch, and it's just /Vtuber Talk on Twitter as well. I actually do not have my next show scheduled at this time because I'm going to be traveling for about a week. So there will be a small little break between shows, but I am in talks with a couple others trying to figure out some finalized scheduling for either late this month, most likely going to be starting in November. But one thing I do have several months out, my second anniversary charity marathon, which will be in January, is a special event that I ran for the first time this year. We raised $4,000 for Child's Play charity. Really looking forward to bring that back again this January. Oh, I see movement. Roy, are you back? Whoop.
I am in fact back.
Aha.
Hello.
Welcome on back.
Thank you.
All right, where were we? So yes, yeah, fun times in Texas. Stay
Yes.
inside. Air conditioning is a wonderful invention.
Yes, just stay inside.
So cooking and baking, you mentioned that one of the previous journeys you've had in content creation was actually a cooking and baking channel, and that was where some of the initial concepts for the Cup of Dust came in.
Yep.
I'm gonna, reverse what you had and just spring it back on you. That what are I guess let's start at the beginning. What got you into cooking and baking? Because obviously everyone eats food, and like you said, food is a big part of everyone's life, but not everybody is into the preparation of food. What got you into the preparation?
Honestly, I was just kind of experimenting with content. Because like I said, I've been doing content creation since 2017. And prior to doing like the food and the baking and the cooking, I was specifically struggling to find something that was my own niche or my own genre. And I knew that I wanted to do content creation, but I was really struggling to find what I wanted. And so finally I stumbled across Binging with Babish, which obviously he's massive now. But I was like, you know what? Why don't I experiment with that? So like I filmed in a very similar style to him. I looked up recipes. I themed it specifically around video games or anime or pop culture and things like that. And made it so I would kind of broaden my like nerd horizons into foods that I've never experienced before, but also games that I may not have normally experienced and things of that nature. So it was I already really liked food at that point. And I never like disliked baking or anything like that, and I always thought it was fun. But this was an attempt at finding something that I both liked and could make content about. And unfortunately, it didn't work that way.
Now, when you say getting it related to games and anime and things, do you mean preparing food and dishes from those games or shows? Or
yeah, specifically.
Did you have any favorite recipes or ones that you maybe even now actually just prepare for yourself today?
Nothing that I prepare for myself now. Just because like I don't have nearly as much time as I used to. So if I'm cooking myself something, it's usually relatively quote unquote quick. Not that it's always unhealthy, but like when I would bake, I usually take like 4 to 6 hours to bake something. I use it as a leisure activity.
Gotcha.
And I make sure that I can take my time and just enjoy myself. But like when it comes to like the things that I did on the show, God, was there anything that I like especially enjoyed? I don't know. I don't remember anything particular that like really stood out to me as like, oh my god, this is amazing. I should make this all the time. Like there were mostly things that I had before. I think the weirdest thing that I had made was Ratatouille.
Mm.
And I made it from I did like a Genshin Impact Ratatouille because I think it was like Venti's signature dish or something like that.
Okay.
And I didn't do it amazing, but it was like I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like I've never had this before, and I hope I made it right type thing.
Mm. It's interesting that the Ratatouille came from Genshin Impact, and obviously, not Ratatouille the movie.
Yeah, I did the Genshin aspect because Genshin was like I think had just come out at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Like COVID was like just starting, and like I was like, hey, Genshin's kind of popping off right now. Like, why don't I do Genshin content?
It makes
So
sense, and it works. That it's clear that you approach things from an experimental and analytical side. Like you were saying, at that point in time, you were experimenting with your content and just trying to find things that you enjoyed. And it makes natural sense that if you see something that is sort of popping off, becoming really popular at the time, that you're gonna follow that. And it is unfortunate that it wound up not being the thing that clicked, but timelines. If that had clicked, maybe you wouldn't have become a VTuber and we wouldn't be talking right now.
it's true, yeah. Like there's so many things that ended up happening down like the pipeline that I'm like, God, if I didn't fail at this, or if I didn't fail at this, or if I kept going with this, like I wouldn't have ended up at VTubing. Like I was also doing fighting games a lot and trying to not go pro, but like I was going to like tournaments and stuff and trying to like compete for like money and compete with professionals and things like that. So like I was like, that's a possible avenue I could reach or like chase. So there's like so many things that I tried in the span of like 2015 to like leading up into VTubing. Even before I started streaming, I was doing tons of stuff on the side, you know?
Making sure I have the order of everything correct. So chronologically, what is the order of cooking, speedrunning, fighting games?
Fighting games has always been a thing. I got into fighting games in 2009 with Blaze Blue Calamity Trigger and Street Fighter 4. And then from there, I fell in love with the complexity of them, specifically in 2012, because I started working at a video game chain where I met one of my friends in mods, Ryuhi, and he took me to some local tournaments, and I ended up really liking the fighting game community, and so fighting games has always been a thing. In terms of speedruns, speedrunning is actually something that I started with streaming. So that was 2017. The cooking and baking channel would have been the newest thing back in like either 2020 or late 2019, early 2020. Or no, it was during COVID. So it would have been,
That had to have been 2020 in that case.
yeah, it would have had to have been in
So,
February or later.
Yeah, so cooking in that case was the most recent, but also definitively the shortest chapter in this.
So shortest, yes, but painstaking, yes, also.
A lot
Because
goes into cooking.
Well, so it wasn't just that, because I was trying to make content out of it. I was trying to make sure that people saw my content and saw quality. And like I said, I was using binging with Babish as a material source or a inspiration. And so I was looking at the quality of his work, and I was trying to think of what I could do to reach that. So like at the time, I was working a full-time job, just as I am now, and so working full-time job, come home from job, film for 4 to 6 hours of that episode, and then the next day work job, come home from job, spend 8 hours editing.
Yeah.
And then put it up and get 10 views, and I'd be like, and I did that for 8 weeks in a row. It was bad, and that was also while I was trying to do speedrunning still. That was during the FF7 remake time. So like life was not good then.
Yeah.
It was a rough time.
Well, hey, like we said, it's a lesson learned there.
Yeah.
But so for fighting games, you say it started with Blaze Blue.
Blaze Blue and Street Fighter 4.
Mm, uh, those are so. This is another area that is very interesting for me because I have played each of those games
Mhm.
exceedingly casually. Haven't played much of Blaze Blue. Played a little bit of Street Fighter. I know that you were into Smash Brothers, and I have played a fair bit of that. None of them ever competitively, but I enjoy seeing competitive play of it. Like I enjoy watching tournaments. I have a couple of friends who are in that community, so this is gonna once again be something where I have fragments of knowledge and inherent interest and fascination, but that there's a lot of gaps in the knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, from what I know, Blaze Blue and Street Fighter, while obviously both fighting games, that they do have a fair number of differences that most franchises are going to have different pieces that make them just different enough that you do need to be specialized if you're going to be getting deeper into those scenes.
Yeah. So at Blaze Blue, it's what we in the FGC usually call an anime fighter. Not just because of the anime aesthetic, but because of the way that it plays. It relies heavily on air combos and speed and flashiness to it. Anime fighters generally are like Blaze Blue, Persona 4 Arena, Guilty Gear, Uniel, Grand Blue Fantasy, the fighting game. And then it starts to branch off a little bit where like most people would be like, all right, well, what about Dragon Ball Fighters? Dragon Ball Fighters is a weird one where it kind of sits in its own realm of being an anime fighter because it's literally anime, but it's more of a tag fighter like Marvel vs. Capcom or Skullgirls. So from Blaze Blue, it's just what got me into fighting games. I didn't stick with it. I just liked it. I liked learning combos and playing online. Street Fighter 4 is where I really started getting into fighting games and really where I found my love for competitive fighting games, and especially the Street Fighter 4 era fighting games, like the late 2000s into the like mid 2010s was the boom of fighting games. We had Ultra Street Fighter 4, King of Fighters 13, Tekken Tag 2, Virtua Fighter 5, DOA 5, what was happening? Skullgirls was out. We had like so many great competitive fighters. Smash showed up at Evo. We had all these great booms in the fighting game community, and it felt like a new golden era. And then unfortunately, we had Street Fighter 5 with a really shitty approach. We had Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Tekken 7 took a pretty long time to leave arcades. We didn't have a great anime fighting scene because we had Blaze Blue Cross Tag, which was okay, and I know people will fight to defend it, but this is also where we started getting into like the realm of, hey, netcode's really important and then hey, COVID started, and the fighting game community is still on life support right now. It's why I'm super excited for things like Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, King of Fighters 15 was super fun. I've kind of fallen off of it a bit, but like Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 especially, I see so many people hyping these games up, and Project L, the League of Legends fighting game that Riot's working on. So many people are now excited about it, and it feels like we're about to come into another golden age of fighting games, despite still being in COVID times.
So, as somebody who is not super educated on all this, what makes Street Fighter V and Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle not as successful? That you said that Street Fighter V was sort of a step back, and that these didn't click as well. What are the differences? Because to me, the layman, I do not really pick up on the intricacies, but I'm sure they exist. But what are they?
So Blaze Blue, I think, was more so balanced at the beginning. It was really obvious like who the top tier characters were, and then later it turned into netcode, and that the netcode was not good. They were probably not using GGPO rollback, which is like the industry standard now.
I do know about rollback netcode.
Rollback netcode is a must. If you make a fighting game nowadays and your game does not have rollback netcode in it, it's a trash game. I don't care who it makes it. It's why Smash Ultimate is a trash game. It doesn't have rollback netcode. It has delay-based netcode that was the same use as freaking Brawl on the Wii. Trash. And the fact that they didn't update it or try to fix it, especially during COVID times, a big F you to Nintendo for that. And then pulling out of Evo. So Nintendo, like... But anyway, Blaze Blue Cross Tag specifically had those issues. Big balance issues at launch, big network issues at launch. But also, like, people weren't really looking for a tag fighter out of Blaze Blue. So it took like an amalgamation of a bunch of different things, and it was like, these are kind of cool, I guess, and then was immediately overshadowed by Dragon Ball Fighters. So like Blaze Blue Cross Tag came out, and then I think either a year or a year and a half later, Dragon Ball came out, and immediately everybody was on Dragon Ball. But the thing with Street Fighter that really sucked is it launched with a very small roster. It was 16 characters, which in Street Fighter's past usually bigger. Especially since Street Fighter 4, I think we ended with like 40 plus characters. The balance was really bad. The net play was garbage. The actual features of the game were non-existent. It was a kerfuffle, and it took Street Fighter 5, and I'm not kidding when I say this, it took Street Fighter 5 4+ years to be an acceptable game, launching at $60. And it actually was a commercial failure for its first 3 years. It took them 3 years to financially recover
to get
and
the
actually
sales
start making a profit.
actually, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It was bad. Street Fighter 5 put Street Fighter in a really bad position. Pros genuinely said they didn't like playing it, but they had to because it's where the money was.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, it was just rough because Street Fighter was such a staple in bringing fighting games into the main stage, and then for it to be the weakest thing in the main stage was like, man,
It's
how
an
did we get
awkward
here?
position.
Yeah, it's
Now,
bad.
Does the community know at this point in time the netcode status of Street Fighter 6 and of these other games, or is that something that is usually discovered on launch?
So Street Fighter 5 is already confirmed, or Street Fighter 6 is already confirmed that it's using rollback netcode, which is great. I think Tekken is the only one that hasn't like really confirmed. Everyone else is basically like, at this point, you're making your game with rollback in it because it's free. GGPO rollback netcode is actually free, like legitimately free, and it's great netcode. It was designed for Skullgirls specifically, and Skullgirls to this day, even though that game came out in 2012 or 2013, still has impeccably good netcode, and everybody should be using it because it's free. And the people that made that netcode are now working on Project L for Riot, which is fantastic. But we know that Street Fighter 6 is using rollback. We don't know what Tekken 8 is using. We're going to assume rollback because they get shit on a lot for their net as well.
At this point, you sort of hope that companies and developers have gotten the memo.
Yeah, because it's been 10 years since GGPO came out. And it's been 10 years since players have been complaining about it. There's no reason to not use it anymore. And it's... people are no longer accepting delay-based netcode. I mean, Dragon Ball Fighters is even putting rollback netcode in, you know? Like, it's that big of a deal. They're making, like, big patch deals out of it because, hey, COVID is still here. We can't all play offline. Online play is really important. You need to have good, reliable, playable online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the really interesting things of that. Part of one, gaming becoming more global, and that the fighting game community becoming something that you want to be able to fight people, from your home and be able to actually get good practice matches in without having to have a friend come over to your place and just play whoever you're able to actually get on your couch next to you. Mm-hmm. But also, obviously, like you said, in the era of COVID, that it takes on a whole new level of importance where you are going to actually want to have full tournaments run completely virtually, and that obviously I know Evo has gone back to in person, but that you're not going to want to have every tournament be like that. And also just being able to run online tournaments inherently means that your community is going to be able to grow exponentially, because you can now get to all these folks around the world. You can organize and get more people for any given tournament, but also for folks who might be, not geographically close to what would normally have been regional qualifiers, and that they can now actually qualify, and that if they're able to get through that, then they can go to, either nationals or worlds, whatever you have in your given competitive play structure.
Yeah, the fighting game community has come a long way, and it's really unfortunate because it felt like we were hitting a golden era. Like I said, Street Fighter 4 and Ultra Street Fighter 4, 2014 was a wild ride. And honestly, I would probably say that the downfall kind of started with King of Fighters 14 being such a trash game. I don't remember when that specifically came out, but 2014 was like the last like golden push. Fighting games were really starting to get into esports. There was big money that Capcom was offering because they had already announced that they were partnering with Sony exclusively for Street Fighter, and then it would also come out on PC. But as soon as Street Fighter 5 came out, and then COVID hit, like it felt like one bad trip after another, after another, after another, and now it feels like we're starting to build towards something great again. Everything that I've seen for Street Fighter 6 has been great so far. Netcode was great. The functionality of the beta was great. People are loving the feel of the game, the sound of the game, the play of the game. And I know people are just ready to get into fighting games again.
One thing I remember seeing from some of the early information about Street Fighter 6 is that they have a simplified input system where you can hit a button instead of having to do a full set of input combos. Correct me if I'm wrong on this.
I don't think I understand.
And for some reason, I remember seeing that, that there was going to be two control schemes, one of which usually doing a Hadoken has, like you swipe up the control stick and have your input, versus that there will be a mode where you can just do a simple button press for the input, and that certain input sequences were going to be streamlined. Like I said, I could be wrong. I could be remembering something completely incorrect.
No, that is something for Street Fighter 6. I'm happy that that's not the staple way to play. Something I actually dislike about fighting games nowadays, or at least that they've been trying to do, is implementing, which sounds weird, but I don't like them making fighting games easier. We saw it a lot with Street Fighter 5, unfortunately, and it was part of why Street Fighter 5 failed. They tried to make it too accessible, and too many characters played like each other, and you lost the fun because everyone's like game plan was like walk up, stand, medium punch, or walk up, crouch, medium punch, and then into a block string, and then the same stuff.
Yeah, at a certain point, you are stripping away the skill required, and that's why I think it's so cool that 6 has the toggle, effectively, that you can choose which input mode you're going to do, and that I think it is important to have accessibility for any game, for any franchise, similar to what I was saying about Pokemon and Power Rangers being able to, have any game be your first. And in this case, being able to just hop in and play and have a good time is going to be important for game sales. But, like you said, you don't want to make things too homogenous, and you also want to make it so people actually do have to express skill in a game.
Yep.
And having it so, yes, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have these two modes, I think is a very smart design decision.
Yeah, it'll help new players get in, but it's also important to be able to have the bigger, fancier stuff that gives them something to aspire to.
Yeah.
With Street Fighter 6 especially, it looks like there's so much more freeform, and people are playing differently even though they're playing the same characters, and I'm seeing different game plans, and it's nice. It's refreshing after the shitstorm that was Street Fighter 5.
Do you have any mains from 4 or 5, and do you notice that you have any consistency? That I know sometimes some folks will find a character that they like in a game and that they will continue with that main through iterations, but sometimes people have one main in one game and a different in another one.
So unfortunately, my main from Street Fighter 4 didn't make it into 5. And
oh no!
My 5 main was the first time in 5, like in Street Fighter in general. So I very much was like lost in that transition. I played DJ in Street Fighter 4. I just had a lot of fun with him. I love the play style. It was a ton of fun. He's actually like a classic character, like he's from what's it called, the extended roster from Street Fighter 2. He's classic. He's OG. But he didn't make it to Street Fighter 5, and I kind of understand why. DJ ended up being kind of eclectic, and a little racist. But Ed was the character that I played in Street Fighter 5, and that was his first iteration. And now I'm very lucky that Street Fighter 6 had a roster leak like the day after they showed off like actual gameplay of it.
Oh.
And all of us are now convinced that it was Capcom that leaked it intentionally, and that they were trying to test the waters to see what people thought of the redesigns.
Oh,
and the roster leak was super well received.
Then, I enjoy conspiracy theories like that because it's the type of thing of, that sounds like something out of a political thriller of, okay, we're going to leak this intentionally to
I think they
have
did,
this certain
honestly.
thing. I guess the reason that they would intentionally leak but not actually just say it is because that is their back door of if the leak happens and it's not well received, that they can change and say, oh no, this was never real.
Yeah. Or can change small things at least. Even if
And
like their overall plans don't change, they can at
that
least
there's
change
no
some things.
commitment at that point plus
Yep.
plausible deniability.
Yep. And it was super well received. And specifically for me, hey, both of my mains from Street Fighter 4 and 5 are making it into 6. Both DJ and Ed are in that leak. And we have DJ confirmed already because they showed the intro for the game and DJ was in the intro.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
Ed hasn't been shown off yet, but he was in the leak. So
The closest I ever got to being in the fighting game community was I did play a lot of Smash Brothers Brawl. And my main was Wolf. So I was heartbroken when 4 came along.
Oh, yeah, they didn't have Wolf.
Nope. So I can share that particular pain of having your main just ripped away from you. Didn't end up really that. When I say the closest I got to being competitive, that I would go to my local stores every so often, and never went to anything like regionals or whatnot. But I was able to get several rounds deep in just local play, and it was fun. I enjoyed that, and that was good enough for me. Didn't really play much of 4. Really enjoyed Brawl. Never did anything super competitive. Barely any online play. Then most of that for me was just I enjoyed World of Light and the single player experience, plus just playing with friends.
I gotcha.
For you, do you notice that you have any particular style that, as someone who isn't super familiar with Street Fighter, do those 2 mains from 4 and 5 have stylistic similarities?
Nope.
Aha!
DJ is very much a zoning and then mix-up character, and Ed was very much a footsies and then rush down character. So they played very differently. But like I played a lot of characters in 5. I think I had like 9 or 10 different characters that I tried to play until I landed on Ed. Yeah, it's sometimes you just gotta play the game, different approaches work differently in different Street Fighters. Street Fighter 4 had much more defensive options than Street Fighter 5 did. So obviously, like, I wasn't going to play a defensive, like, zoning character. But in 4, I could. In 5, I couldn't. I had to adopt the rushdown.
For Blaze Blue, was there anything there what were the types of mains that you had in that game?
Oh, I played Ragna, just because I like main characters.
Fair. Very fair. Would you say, I guess, if you could be involved in designing a fighting game, are there any particular pieces from any franchise that you say, if Street Fighter adopted this aspect from Blaze Blue, it would take something to the next level? Or, I guess, especially since there is such a delineation between the anime fighters, tag fighters, and the other fighter games, I guess, what is the proper umbrella for Street Fighter?
I mean,
that would just be a generic fighting that
2D fighter usually.
2D fighter. Gotcha. Are there any pieces that you would like to see from one genre of fighters adopted into another that you think could play well while still allowing it to keep its initial identity?
So one of the things that I like that Street Fighter 6 is doing, and this is what I would have said, especially coming from Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5 was super restrictive of like the combo routing that you could take. And it was like, this is your bread and butter, this is your max damage, and there was nothing outside of it. So you very rarely ever saw different combos, which is a huge complaint about the competitive scene of Street Fighter 5. Everyone played the same characters, and if they weren't playing the same characters, they were at least using the same combos that you always saw over and over again.
Yeah,
everything that I've seen,
there was a clear optimal path.
Yeah, and there was never a reason to go away from it. But in Street Fighter 6, I'm seeing there's a lot more free form. There's a lot of freedom given to combo routing. There's laxed juggle states, meaning you can juggle your opponents for longer, do cooler air combos, do cooler extensions, maybe lead into mix-ups or just stuff like that. And that's something that I always like from anime fighters. You got these cool extensions, maybe for different meters being spent. You see it a lot in Guilty Gear with its Roman cancel system, and
Roman
and
cancel
things of that
system?
nature. Yeah, it's like you spend meter to cancel specials or normals in certain ways, and it would like freeze the screen and give you time to like reestablish yourself and then continue the combo, or sometimes make something that wasn't safe. And I'm
Where does
seeing
the
that.
term Roman come from? Is this because was there a character named Roman or something that?
No, it's just what the game calls them. The Roman cancels. It's just what the game calls them.
Huh. Oh, wait a minute. Is this ROAM and Rome and?
No, Roman like ROMAN.
Okay,
Roman
so
cancel.
it is like Roman.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out.
I think it's just what the game has called them since it came out.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just thinking it was like I'm not getting where that terminology is coming from, and sometimes
It's just a Guilty Gear term.
Huh.
It's like Hadoken is like a Street Fighter fireball, you know?
Okay, yeah. Because
The game just calls them Roman cancels.
Because sometimes you see in different communities that jargon can sometimes come from either the character that first used a thing or that there's a lot of different ways that terms come up. So interesting that one actually is just that's what it was called to begin with.
Yeah, it's just Roman cancels, yeah. But you get that free factor in Guilty Gear. Roman cancels let you be really creative with your pressure, with your defense, with your offense, with a lot of different things. And it seems like Street Fighter 6's, I believe they're calling it the drive gauge, which controls your EX meter, it controls your defensive options, your dash cancels, it controls a lot of different things. And because of that, I'm seeing a lot more originality in combos. I'm seeing a lot more originality in gameplay. And I'm especially seeing some really cool moments.
Like I'm excited hearing how excited you are for the game because I've from the couple other friends that I have that are into fighting games, I've been getting a similar vibe of that. A lot of people are really excited for 6, and that there seems to be a lot of promise. And I'm really happy for that community because even as someone who is not actually involved in it, that I can certainly sympathize and recognize the struggles that it's had. First and foremost, just, the past couple years, the fact that in-person tournaments have not been viable and the game's netcode not being built to handle what a competitive scene needs is
Smash.
It's like, that's just a terrifying prospect on paper, and it's a very easy to understand thing. Like, you don't need to know much else of just can't have in-person tournaments, and the games aren't fast enough to behave online as they would in person. Even the layman can understand that's a problem.
Yep, it is legitimately what killed Smash. And anybody that tells you that Smash isn't dead is not thinking clearly.
And also Nintendo has actually finally, for the first time, organized, or rather approved the organization of a proper Smash competitive circuit that they have partnered up with a company called Panda.
Yeah, Panda Global. Yep. It's been a big talk in the fighting game community because Nintendo also pulled out from Evo.
Yeah, because that was the other thing that I know happened beforehand.
There was a conspiracy theory going around that they pulled out because they partnered with Panda, or that because Sony now owns Evo. But Nintendo has never liked Evo. They tried to not let Melee be played the year that Melee got nominated, and then 2 years later they were like, all right, we don't want Melee there again, and they were like, no, we're playing Melee here, you can't stop us.
Nintendo has never been very good about things that aren't under their direct control.
Nintendo sucks.
I love Nintendo. I'm a Nintendo diehard, but I'm not going to defend Nintendo at the same time.
Nintendo's made some very bad decisions in the past. Since the Switch launched, it has been crystal clear that Nintendo has no intentions of changing as a company and growing with the times. And especially since COVID started, they have been one of the most disappointing companies to see develop in modern gaming. Genuinely, they are, I think, my biggest disappointment in gaming right now.
And it's such a shame because Nintendo does do a lot of things right. They have so many good games, but especially when it comes to community engagement, whether it be the fighting game community or really any other community, they have never been good about things outside their own walls and just how to manage and handle and try to grow. And it's very sad because, frankly, just think about for how successful, legitimately successful Nintendo is, they could be even more.
I mean, you can even see it with games like Splatoon 3. Splatoon 3 is a fucking mess because the online is not really good and there's
But
a
at the
lot
same
of
time-
disconnection.
But people
You
are still
know?
having a blast, and so many people are playing it with
Yep.
these problems. Imagine how it could be if it was not having those problems.
Yep. Yeah, it's a damn shame.
Yeah. Maybe someday. Maybe. Not gonna hold my breath.
We'll find
But-
out. We'll find out one day.
Maybe. So on the other hand, it does sound like Capcom fortunately has been responsive, and that Arc System is the one that does BlazBlue, correct?
Yes, but they also do Guilty Gear, and Guilty Gear is
That's
more
right.
so their child right now. Because Strive is doing very well.
Mm.
Like ArcSys has their shit together. They are also the ones that made Dragon Ball FighterZ. ArcSys has their hands in a lot of different cookie jars.
It-
Like
It's been really cool to see the name Arc Systems really just emerge in the past decade and a half or so, because
Yeah.
now they are pretty much the name, I would say, in fighting games.
they are the anime fighting company.
Yeah.
No other company can trounce them when it comes to anime fighters. It's why when DNF Duel got announced, the Dungeon Fighter Online fighting game, when they like announced that they were doing it, I was genuinely angry and went, why are they making this and not working with some company like Bandai Namco to make like a My Hero Academia fighter or a Jujutsu Kaisen fighter or a Demon Slayer fighter? And then you see fucking Bandai Namco making the Demon Slayer arena fighter that's just a cookie cutter copy of the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm series, and it makes me so angry because I know Arc Sys is big enough now. They are the anime fighting company,
Yeah.
and to see them do something like DNF instead of literally, they could have done so many. They could have done JoJo. They could have done Fate.
Well,
they could have done My Hero
I
Academia,
guess-
and they have enough sway for that.
It's such an interesting thing because I mentioned that I worked events a lot. The events that I worked were anime conventions, and I've
Mhm.
worked for industry, and that I have done a lot of contract work, never full-time work, but talking with them, you hear that just the licensors in Japan can be very choosy, very protective of the agreements that they make.
Oh yeah,
And it makes
get
me
that.
wonder that while Arc System Works now is very big here, it's a type of thing that I do wonder if they actually might have had the options or if not, because I could very easily believe that the license holders for Jujutsu Kaisen, for My Hero Academia, might say, all right, we'd rather sign these rights over to Bandai Namco, these very
So-
historical powers, or has there been actual information to come out to say that Arc System had the options on these rights?
I don't know if they had the options, but the fact that Arc Systems did work with Bandai Namco to make Dragon Ball FighterZ, because Bandai Namco has the rights to, like, if there's an anime that's popular, Bandai Namco has the rights to make the game for it.
Basically, yeah.
It's JoJo, it's Naruto, it's any of the big three, it's Dragon Ball, it's anything that's popular nowadays. Bandai Namco has the rights to.
Yeah.
So the fact that Arc Systems did work with them on Dragon Ball FighterZ and then went off and made DNF Duel, instead of being like, hey, Bandai Namco, we just made you a shitload of money on Dragon Ball FighterZ. You should let us make another anime fighter that's really popular right now, like My Hero Academia or Jujutsu Kaisen or JoJo or anything like that. The fact that they didn't and they went for DNF Duel instead makes me frustrated to no end because it just feels like a waste.
It definitely suggests that something somewhere along the line broke down, and that we might not know which end it broke down from, but I can certainly sympathize that seeing something as good as Dragon Ball FighterZ and then saying, all right, we have this partnership, we have this collaboration, why can't it continue
Yeah.
with another franchise that whether it be on Bandai Namco side, whether it be on the anime licensor side, whether it be on Arc System side, that I can certainly agree that going with something that isn't as mainstream does feel like squandered potential.
Yep. Yeah, so that pisses me off. There's a lot of fighting game stuff like that I'm very either tinfoil hat or very cold in my takes on, or like I say it how it is instead of trying to
Yeah.
protect feelings.
No, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Is there a series that has not gotten a fighting game that you want to see get a fighting game?
It still blows my mind that My Hero Academia doesn't have a fighting game. I
I
don't
think
understand.
well,
Like they have one of the dumb arena fighters that Bandai
okay,
Namco loves to shell out because they're easy to make and they make them tons of money, which I
yeah,
understand. It makes them tons of money, but the fact that we don't have like a proper My Hero Academia fighting game blows my mind. With how big the franchise is.
yeah,
Same with Naruto. Well, I mean, technically we had those on like the GameCube-ish, but that turned into Ninja Storm. But like the fact that we don't have any of like real big mainstream popular anime to the level or to the caliber that Dragon Ball FighterZ is, it just blows my mind. It just feels like such wasted potential.
yeah. It is very interesting just to see, like you said, the fact that usually all these things they get the simple arena fighters that I forget what the name of the My Hero Academia one is, but you know they've made a
One's
fighting
Justice,
game.
or
Yeah, this one's Justice sounds right, but it is a fighting game, but it is not a competitive fighting game.
it's not a fighting game, it's an arena fighter.
And just these are the types of things that I wish I could be a fly on the wall for these types of discussions of like, you know, how do things end up as they end up? That
Money.
inevitably.
That's money. It's their tried and true formula. God, you want my tinfoil hat theory for this goes deep though.
Have at it.
Well, specifically, Bandai Namco makes a lot of money on their arena fighters, which is their formula is following the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm formula. They have taken many anime franchises and done that to them, and then they've sold like gangbusters. The Demon Slayer version of that sold like gangbusters, but it was terribly reviewed. Like, people didn't play that game competitively, people talked about it for like a week, and then it died. But Bandai Namco made a ton of money on it because everybody and their brother bought it because Demon Slayer was super popular. The other funny thing is, and this is where the tinfoil hat theory continues. You know what other franchise Bandai Namco owns? Dot Hack. You know what company makes these arena fighters? The same company that makes Dot Hack. Do you know that we haven't had a new Dot Hack since the GU series? Surprisingly, the same time that the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm series started getting really popular. My tinfoil hat theory is Bandai Namco won't let them make a new Dot Hack because they're afraid it won't sell as well as a Ninja Storm clone. So they keep doing that because they want more money, which is understandable. But please let CyberConnect 2 go. Please.
That's such an interesting theory because it's a very grounded theory that, you know, obviously, you know, there's so much there that can't definitively be proven, but at the very least, I will give you that, Roy, that, you know, money is going to be the major deciding factor in any business's decisions. And the line there of, okay, we had this studio that the last thing they did that wasn't one of these fighters was a very niche game.
Yeah.
And that as we have them as a resource and we see what they are good, efficient, and profitable at doing, that we will continue to implement this resource, this studio, in this way, and not put them back to a very, very niche franchise game does at least, you know, I could very easily believe that. Will we ever know definitively? Probably not. But if as far as tinfoil hat theories go, I will call that a sound one.
I know it's money related because
inevitably everything is money.
Oh yeah, I know the heads of CyberConnect 2, specifically when the HD collection for GU came out, they were like, hey, listen, we've been getting a lot of people asking about the original 4.hack games and if we're ever going to get an HD collection for them or a remake. And they were like, if you guys want a remake for the original 4.hacks or an HD collection, buy this HD collection. And it sold okay. Like, it didn't sell poorly. But, like, them being, like, the only way we can make it is if it sells is telling. And later, Harada, who is the executive producer on Tekken and one of the big execs in Bandai Namco, explained that Namco is not like Capcom in the sense that they don't take risks. Bandai Namco specifically does things that they know will work. They do things that will make them money, and they don't take many risks. Capcom is in their risk-taking era, where they remade RE2 Remake, hoping it would do well. They completely changed the direction that Resident Evil was going with Resident Evil 7. They took big risks with Street Fighter 5, and it didn't pay off. They took big risks with Monster Hunter World, and then went back to Rise, and they knocked it out of the park. Like, Capcom and Bandai Namco are very much antitheses of each other.
Yeah.
So
That's so interesting. And it's like, I'm very much a business nerd. I love these types of speculation because, like you said, everything's based on money. And then it's just sort of reverse engineering. All right. Obviously, no company is going to do something that they know isn't going to sell well. But things, obviously, in many cases, go wrong and don't sell well. And that then begs the question, all right, what were the conversations? What were the assumptions? What were the decisions made that led to the end result? What did they think would work that didn't, or what are they thinking that is going to be optimal for revenue that results in this thing? And the concept of, we have the studio that we see does this thing really well, and then, well, when the niche thing that they remade didn't sell well, then why the heck would we go back on that? That's stupid.
It would be nice to get some transparency about it, but at the same time, video game companies don't owe us that.
No.
Because there are many occasions where they know better about what we want than we do.
Yeah,
where like we might be, we might be screaming, "Hey, give us a .hack HD remake," like I am saying, but I can tell you, like, it would sell under 1 million copies, most likely, unless it's like the best remake of an RPG ever made.
Yeah, but at the same time, the thing of, all right, well, you have Dragon Ball Z Fighters, which did very, very well for both.
Yeah, but it's Dragon Ball. Like, it was gonna sell well. But they also took the precautions to make it sell well by going to Arc Systems Work, who was already at the time a very established anime fighting, like, staple in the fighting game community.
And I guess the presumption then has to be that regardless of the game's quality, that Bandai Namco's inherent marketing ability is going to have unit sales of their games higher than Arc System Works, and that even though Arc Systems has become so good and reliable at development, that it is going to be difficult to beat the marketing department of Bandai Namco. And I think perhaps that's where it just falls into place, that maybe it's not even necessarily that they don't want to let this other studio work on something that isn't an arena fighter, but that the marketing department, not the development department, has the difference in power.
I mean, it's very possible, but it's at that point it's just tinfoil hat theories and me just complaining that we're not getting another .hack.
No, that's my tinfoil hat theory of just but I enjoy those types of interesting thought experiments.
They can be fun from time to time.
Yeah. So when is 6 coming out? Because I forget if the release date's been announced yet.
For Street Fighter?
Yeah.
It'll be February. They haven't announced it yet, but every Street Fighter game in the past decade has come out in February.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even notice that they had that consistency, but but Pokemon games always come out in November because they're always aiming for right before Black Friday and holiday season. And it makes sense that February is usually when you're going to get the ones that want the earlier cycle of, just after the stuff that was holiday new has worn off. That, that's sort of the next season for release waves.
They also don't want to self-compete because I know Resident Evil 4 Remake is already confirmed for March. So I would imagine that, like, 2 big Capcom titles, like, Street Fighter is going to be a constant thing. So, like, it coming out before Resident Evil is fine. And then people will play Resident Evil, and then what they'll probably do is, like, first big waves of DLC will probably come out in April, May for Street Fighter 6. Or big updates.
Yeah. Have they spoken at all how they're going to transition over the competitive scene? Because that's one of the really interesting things for any competitive game, that the way that they shift and sort of delineate, all right, this is the end of this era and where we go with the new one.
I don't believe so, because I think it's been in a weird place, because Capcom, I could probably Google it. Capcom usually runs their own thing apart from EVO called the Capcom Cup. And I know Street Fighter V is obviously still their game because Street Fighter 6 isn't out yet. I would imagine that whatever Capcom Cup we're in currently is the last one. And I think they're usually in December? Question mark? I genuinely don't remember because it's been a while since I've watched them or enjoyed them. They were really bad and, like, really cringe for a while, and not like the fun, like, I'm free cringe, like the why are you doing this? This is not what Street Fighter is about cringe.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's been a rough COVID for for Capcom for Street Fighter 5 specifically. It's gotten better. The game has gotten better. It just took 5 years for
Yeah.
a fighting game to get good.
Yeah, that on the competitive side, Nintendo does not know what to do with competitive stuff. The Pokemon Company does, though. That I'm not sure if you follow competitive Pokemon at all.
Not really. I'm like one of those like kind of boomers when it comes to like Pokemon, because like
That's fair.
the last time I enjoyed competitive Pokemon was Let's Go, because like it felt like a chess match.
Yeah.
And I really liked it, because even if you technically didn't have a better team, if you had better swaps, you could win, and like predicted your opponent's moves better, you could win. I like that. I don't like how items work. I don't like how abilities work. I think everything is. I think it's too much. I think there being 700 plus Pokemon, plus hundreds of item combinations, plus Dynamaxing.
It's
plus,
a lot.
it's too many things to plan for. And like
That's
when we
fair.
were looking at Let's Go, it was here's 150, like 155, because I think there were some extras. Here's 150 something Pokemon, no abilities, no items except for Mega Evolutions. That's it.
Yeah. That Pokemon is another game. I've never participated in competitive, but I love watching competitive. That I'll watch Worlds pretty much every year. I don't usually watch like regionals or nationals, but I'll usually watch one or two nationals. I'll watch US a little bit in the finals, and that I'll tune in for Worlds. And that just since I play all the games casually, that I have enough knowledge that when I tune in for Worlds, that I remember the name of that item and I know what it does, and I know this Pokemon. It's actually a very easy thing to watch without having to actually be deep in that scene. And what I know the Pokemon Company has done is that, they've done various iterations, and the competitive scene there fluctuates a lot more because they have seasons and have certain allowances for, which Pokemon are legal and which ones aren't. But what I think is super fun is with Scarlet Violet on the horizon, and this year's Worlds was done in, I think it was August. So the final competitive season of the Sword Shield era is over. And what they've done for the finale is they've just lifted all restrictions. They've said, go wild. Nothing here matters anymore. You can use any Pokemon, use all the mythical and legendary Pokemon you want, any items. Just competitive is over. So don't worry about it. And that for these last couple of months, everything is legal. Have at it. And I do think it's fun from the competitive perspective to just say, okay, yes, for this very specific time in this game cycle, we don't need to care about competitive balance. So for just this one moment, let's just take everything, all the restrictions off. And I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
I recognize that's something that the fighting game community certainly doesn't have, that just generally speaking, everything's going to be legal, and that you will have balancing done, and that, like you said, the sheer number of decisions that the Pokemon competitive community has is unlike what the fighting game community has. That the fighting game community's decisions are split-second decisions, in-match decisions.
Yeah.
Pokemon decisions that the high-level stuff does end up becoming like a chess match, but there's so much more that you need to learn and grok and calculate against, and even then, you're not going to get every possible permutation because it's
what prevents me from enjoying it as much, because I'm like,
and I can understand that.
I know some stuff about Pokemon, just like from speedrunning and watching speedrunning and stuff like that. So I know at least enough about like what Pokemon are really good, what Pokemon are bad, what items are really busted, and things like that. And I experimented with whatever the challenge website is, just Pokemon Challenge or whatever it is.
Pokemon Showdown.
Yeah, Showdown. I did that for a bit too. So like I at least know, but like that's where I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I don't like how many things I have to plan for and how many weird combinations there are, because I like having a sense of control. And in fighting games, I get that, because like even if I don't know the matchup, I can still play the way that I want to play, and they have to react to me.
Yeah.
But like if my opponent is like, I don't know, baton passing after like 3 times dragon dancing, and then there's like some weird like toxic orb shit with,
you're gonna get swept, and that you're not gonna have much of an option.
it's like I didn't know this one thing or this one unique thing, and I got swept because of it, and
Hmm.
now I don't get a second chance at it, and it's like, well, that's not fun.
Yeah, I can totally get that. And for all the types of things that you've said you do enjoy, it very much scans how something so very different would not be uh, to your taste.
Yeah, it's like 12D chess.
Yeah, not quite, not quite. Um, Still, that makes perfect sense. And at the same time, you mentioned the difference in Let's Go, and as soon as you were talking about, this is why this was different for me, it totally made sense. I'm just like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, that the Let's Go games are night and day. That is not a conventional Pokemon game by any stretch of the imagination, but
nope.
at the same time, that for you, that difference would be something that would be a huge net positive.
Yeah, competitive for Let's Go was just fun. Like
Mm.
I feel like I got to like learn the game a lot and appreciate it a lot more because like I got to a higher echelon of it where like I could predict things, or if I saw certain Pokemon, like I was like, okay, this is probably their plan. I can play around it, or I could see what a player was thinking or like playing wise. And it just felt good. It
Yeah.
felt good to be able to know what to expect.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes like spontaneity is good, but like in a competitive sense, I don't have fun with it. Watching it might be a separate thing, but playing it definitely not.
Yeah. So I
So
take it that you're planning on being competitive for 6. Do you
100%.
anticipate being competitive? I guess, what is the largest number of games you've been competitive in at the same time?
Fighting game wise,
Yeah,
oh, it's usually just one.
just one.
I try and prioritize a specific fighting game. As
Makes
soon as
sense.
Street Fighter 6 comes out, that's going to be the game that I prioritize
Hmm.
for competitive aspect. But it's if I don't have one particularly that I'm looking at like right now, then I tend to float. Like I'm going to be playing Guilty Gear later this week for the first time. I'm playing Tekken
Yeah, I saw that
7.
on your schedule.
Yeah. So there's like right now I'm in like the lull period where like no fighting game like especially calls to me. So I'm kind
Yeah,
of just playing everything. But as
and
soon as Street Fighter 6 comes out, I'll be hopping on that. I will definitely hop on Tekken 8 when that comes out. But other than that, I don't really have many other games that I'm like freaking out in terms of fighting games that I'm
yeah.
freaking out
It's
to
sort
be
of like
competitive at.
that between generations time right now, anyways. That
Yes.
with so many on the horizon, that it makes sense
Yep.
that now of all times that you're going to be just in that lull, wait and see period.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
We've been at this now for just about 3 hours,
Yeah.
and I don't want to keep you too much later. I have just a couple last questions
Sure.
to really start wrapping things up.
Hit
First
me.
off, do you have any goals for the end of the year that we're now, almost at Halloween, almost at the end of October? Do you have any goals in terms? It could be something metrics related, it could be project related. Of I want to try this type of stream, or you know, host this type of event. Do you have anything that you're really specifically trying to get to before 2023?
Before 2023, I had a couple metrics that I was hoping that I would hit. I don't think I'm going to hit them at this rate though, which is it's like mildly disappointing. But like I've hit a lot of other things that I'm happy about. Like I hit partner this year. I'm really excited about that. I got to go to TwitchCon as a partner, which is dope. But I mean, like I guess the one big thing that I would still love to be able to do is hit YouTube partner. That way I can
Mm,
monetize. But I don't know if I'm gonna hit it. It feels a little bit like a toss up. Um, all that I'm waiting on right now is
it's
public
the
watch
hours.
hours.
Yeah, it's the hours
Yeah.
watch that really is that hurdle over there.
Yep, public watch hours is the big thing that I'm waiting on. I'm more than halfway, but if I don't hit it before the end of the year, then I'm pretty sure it just starts over.
Oh, does it? Is that how they gauge?
I thought it was. I could be wrong on that. I
I
thought it was.
I don't know.
thought
I
it was
don't
watch time
look into
within a
the
year. So
I just upload my VODs to YouTube because it's easy storage for me. It's similar with
yeah.
the channel that I'm not sure how they run it, but I could see that. So, well, at the very least, you're starting the year there, and that if you've reached the halfway point now, that then feels like you're going to be a pretty safe bet for sometime 2023 to hit the
Yeah.
YouTube partner threshold. That at that point, it's going to be a safe bet, I would think.
Yeah, I'd like to hope so and think so, and I'm definitely planning on it for that. But I gotta wait and see.
Yeah. And then the last question I ask all my guests is, what does it being a VTuber mean to you? And that's not what is the definition of a VTuber, but for you, what does it mean to be a VTuber? I've had people say that, it lets me get in touch with my inner child. It lets me be someone who I can't be in real life. I've had others say it is a tool in my toolbox as a content creator. It's a mask that I wear, but I don't necessarily feel a deep personal connection to it. And those answers, while very different, are both entirely valid. So is everything beyond and in between. But I feel that different people, naturally, get something different from VTubing because while VTubing is still content creation, it is a very unique tool set, and how one interacts with that tool set can be anything from clinical to deeply personal. So for you, Roy, what does being a VTuber mean to you?
I think for me, it's creative freedom. One of the big things that I talked about earlier on was that I felt trapped doing speedrunning. So when I transitioned and shifted over into VTubing, I genuinely feel like I could do anything. Not necessarily that it'll do well, but I feel like VTubing is a way to reinvent yourself, and it's beautiful in that sense. Because there are so many people that get into VTubing that either don't look the way their avatars look, or maybe have physical limitations, like Iron Mouse with her immune deficiency.
Mhm.
And I know plenty of other people that have either diseases or disabilities or things that prevent them from succeeding in real life in facets that they wish they could. And that's what I think VTubing is. I think it's a way to overcome adversity and freedom for a lot of people, myself included. I got to reinvent myself as a bunny barista VTuber that specializes in voice acting. You know?
Oh yeah, and I always ask that question because while I never know exactly how someone is going to answer it, the answer always makes sense.
Yeah.
And that, once again, in this case, that like you said, it ties back into several of the things that we've discussed tonight with you having your various iterations, your trial and error, your personal and just content creation growth. And it's been very cool to see that. I can't say that I've been following you since the beginning of your journey, but I've been aware of you for several months now. That I never invite someone on my show unless I know their content at least a certain base level. And certainly from what I've seen of you before today, that you've found a place where you are having fun. You mentioned that you hit a bit of a burnout, but that you are now actually in that bounce back period and that you're continuing forward. And I think that already speaks to a great deal of success, because the fact that you hit the burnout but said, no, I want to keep at this one.
Yeah.
That inherently says that something has gone right here. And I'm really happy for you. And I can't wait to see where you go. That I'm sure whether it's this year or next year, YouTube partner for you is a when, not an if. I'm so happy that you were able to hit partner here on Twitch this year, and I think you have a lot of great things ahead of you, Roy.
Thank you. I really do appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely. And again, just thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I really do appreciate it. Do you have someone that you would like us to raid?
Oh, gosh. I think you can pick.
All right. Let me see. Not actually sure who's live right now. Let me...
Yeah, it's the big thing. I'm like...
Yeah. I'm hoping this doesn't end up causing the stream to chug. Second as we look, but folks, as always, definitely be sure, if you are not already following Roy for some crazy reason, be sure to follow him. It's just Royzoga here on Twitch and on Twitter. He has, as he mentioned, a lot of stuff going on YouTube. He's releasing 2-3 shorts a week, plus some of your stream recaps. Been a lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah, definitely.
So just trying to see who is live. Things are a little bit slow on my end. One thing, I run a bit of a potato.
I got you.
Let's see here. Who might be good? Trying to think who is sort of stylistically similar, who I know you would be familiar with. Ariel is live.
There you go.
And I know that you've collabed with Ariel a fair bit. So let's send things on over to her. All right, well, I'll get that on queued up. But again, everybody in chat, anybody who's watching on YouTube, thank you for getting to the end of the video here on YouTube. Be sure to, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. But to everyone here in Twitch, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed. Roy, again, thank you so much This has been
Thank you.
episode number 82 of VTuber Talk. Can't wait to see you all again. If you're interested and want to see more, like I said, you can follow me here on Twitch or on Twitter, just /VTuber Talk. But regardless, thank you so much for being here, even if only for this one time. Stay safe, stay sane. I will see you all next time. Have a great rest of your evening.
Hell yeah, you too. Thank you.